This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Oh my, yes, please.
You're all set? Okay, all right, thanks, Rick. Yeah, thank you. All right, good morning, everyone. It's Saturday, January 11th, and this is a workshop for the North Haven Board of Finance. This morning, we're going to hear from the library. We're going to hear from Community Services and Recreation, and later the fire department. So we're going to start with the library, and we have Sue Griffiths with us.
Good morning, I'm Sue Griffiths from the library. With us here is Shauna DeStefano, our Assistant Director, Michael Fletcher, Chairman of the Library Board, and Marianne Hardy and Gina Falsigno, also of our Library Board, and they're here in support, so I just wanted to thank them for coming in. All right, let's get started. So last year you did fund us in some capital funding for money to work with a consultant for our strategic plan, and they've been it's been wonderful working with them. They've done a fantastic job. They helped us do a community assessment. So I'm not going to tell you about our strategic plan now, but I just wanted to let you know a little bit of the outcome of the community assessment, which is the base of our strategic plan. And our community basically said that they want the library to be a place where they feel that they belong. They want to be able to share experiences together. Of course, they want to continue to learn all stages of life, so lifelong learning, and learn about new things, so foster curiosity. And they want the library to be the comfortable space that's the community hub. So most of what you're going to see now, you'll see supports these ideas. So the welcoming space, one of the things with one of our focus groups, particularly the parents focus group, they realized when they came, we don't have a lot of space, and they were like, we would love to be able to like put our strollers, have some cubbies. And so we heard that and we acted on that right away. Without any cost, which was fantastic. So on the bottom left, you'll see shelving. That was in the main part of the library. We moved that to our program room, and we took the cubbies that were in there and put them outside, so now we have cubby storage space. We did add coat racks, and we put some tape on the floor to make our stroller parking. And at the bottom of the stairs, we put a welcome sign so that everybody knows when they come in, that they are welcome. And we put up a mural just to, make it a little bit more welcoming when you walk in. And we've received quite a bit of wonderful feedback from that. And as soon as we put up the, literally within an hour of us putting up the coat racks, they were being used. So, and cubbies were same thing. And on the bottom left, that is the mural that's up there was participants from our mixed media art program, 2 to 5-year-olds did finger paintings, and so they all contributed to make that mural. So it's really, you just walk in and you kind of go, oh, it looks great. Access and accessibility. So we've done an internal scan and realized we can do more to be more accessible to the public. And one of the things that we just probably about 3 months ago added to our website is Recite Me. And Recite Me is a tool that allows anybody using our website to use it easier for them. And what that means is, if you're legally blind, you probably have a screen reader. But everybody else who needs to just bump up the font a little, or may have dyslexia and can't read the font that we have, or the color is uncomfortable for them, or you have ADHD and you need a sense to focus. Recite Me is a tool that allows everybody to change the website and access it as it is comfortable for them. The other great thing that it has with it, you can listen. So if you're having trouble reading, you can hover over the text and it recites the words back to you. And it also translates into 140 languages. And I think 60 of those languages, it will speak that. So it's really quite accessible. And you turn that on and off at your convenience and leisure. So it's a wonderful tool. And it's already being used quite a bit. Our app, that's another, everybody's got their phone in their pocket, so I've talked to you over the past couple of years about the app, and we're actually up 680%. Everybody uses the app. It's wonderful. No need to talk more about it. And our library cards, we added 1,265 new cards this year. So, I mean, we're up a huge amount. So people are hearing more about the library, even though it's been around forever, but, you know, we're getting more and more people coming in the doors. And we had about 65,000 people visit the library last year. Books and materials. So this is, there's a whole bunch of stats there. And if you look at everything, I'm going to focus on two things, but we're up across the board. If you look to the right and you see children's circulation, you'll see they're down about 3.2%. And our print books are only up 1.72, and our physical items borrowed is about flat. It's within 100, so I just wrote flat. Everything else is up, but what's a really interesting fact is one family has affected this statistic. We had a family who did homeschooling, and they borrowed in 3.5 years over 18,000 books, items. I'm not lying. We actually could see the number of items. They moved in June of 2023. I was like, well, that was a very nice fiscal year. Thank you for doing it at that point. So they averaged about 5,200 books a year. So if you look at, if you added that 5,200 back in, we'd actually be up 8% in the children's department. And it just is showing you that we're up across the board with the exception of that one family. So yes, we're down, but it's them. But can you imagine 18,000 books and, you know, we'd see them come in and we'd have to prepare. They actually had books of, in our circulation office of their holds. So
I'm sorry to let you know that my across the street neighbors had 7 children and they just moved and they were all homeschooled as well. So they might see another
okay,
tip.
so next year I'll just say, hey Nancy, who's
Yeah, exactly.
who moved? We just knew this family because we missed them quite a bit. They were lovely, but I was like, I bet you they made a difference, and so they did. And the other thing that's up, if you look at Hoopla, I talked every year about Hoopla. It's an ebook platform that we have. It's up 41.88%. And I will tell you, we've actually capped Hoopla. Usage has just gone through the roof. And so we used to let users take out 10 items per month, and it was unlimited, and now we've limited everybody to 7 items per month, but we've also put in a monthly cap because our bill was going through the roof. So we're getting calls daily like, how come I can't take this out on Hoopla? I'm getting blocked, And it's because the monthly budget it ends up being a daily budget. And I mean, we're within $1 of our monthly budget every month because every day we hit our cap. So part of our increase in our materials budget is for Hoopla because it's being used from so many people in our community, and they are getting blocked daily because we've had to put a cap on that budget.
And what would be the cost of increasing that?
I would probably add about $300 a month, but I might even do more. I kind of gauge it towards the, right now it's $1,500 I have it limited to per month. I would like to at least do 3 and potentially do 4. 100.
Per month?
Does anybody have any questions about the statistics?
No, thank you, Sue.
Yep. Databases and software. We have added 6 new databases this year, and they're across the board. So Educate Station is something that will help with homeschooling and elementary school if you want to have your children like continue to work, especially over the summer, like math sheets and reading sheets. Digital literacy and financial literacy. They're just, a lot of people struggle with these areas and need help. These databases are geared towards teens, but they're really useful for everybody. There's a lot of great information. Abdo Digital is a children's reference books. So when the whole school shows up and wants to do a project on animals and 2 kids get the first books, this allows us to have everybody have access to other books about, cheetahs. College Now helps with the college application process, and Universal Class is just an overall general education database, and you can learn, especially if you're need to brush up your skills on Word or Excel, but there's also photography, and and you can actually earn continuing education credits if you fill out the certificate. That usage is up, or overall database usage is up 27%. So we've been adding more, but everybody's using them. So it's nice that that's supported. And Library IQ, our materials budget is, our biggest number that we ask for, and we buy stuff and we have schooling in the background to help us make selections and materials, but Library IQ actually is software that helps us analyze to make sure we're spending our money in the right places. So it will tell us if we're buying books that, never get read, so maybe we see a certain topic. If we're really low in a certain area, we'll say you really need to beef up this part of your collection. And it also helps with weeding, which is when you remove books that are either old or grimy or high use or never used. So it helps us make space for new incoming material, but data is fantastic. When you have that information, you can make informed decisions. So it's a great support tool.
So quick question, to what extent do our school systems feed into any type of information into your materials purchases?
You mean like what's data driven?
Do any of our school principals or school librarians at the elementary, middle, and high school contact you and say, hey, we have this initiative in our school, would it be possible for you to, supplement your buying to make it available to our students here in
So
town?
right now that is not the case, but we do, the middle school uses our ebooks, which is Libby, and that is through PowerSchool, I believe, or their online portal. So they do have access to that, so they are using that. We do have a database called Teaching Books, which is available to the school. It's available to everybody in town, but there's a professional side of it where they can make book lists and get recommendations. So we're making those resources available. The Slate School, which is not a publicly funded school, they do a lot of work with us, and they've asked if they've had a subject that they want to feature, but when they do that, it's beneficial for everybody.
Right.
So we do work with the schools, but they don't ask us to make any specific purchases.
Okay, well, it might be something that we could suggest to the superintendent.
And our children's librarian goes to all of the elementary schools and works with the media specialists there. There just hasn't been a particular materials request, but we do have relationships. And our teen librarian goes to both the middle school and the high school. And our teen librarian is working within the English departments as well. And actually was the one who was the basis for the high school summer reading. So we are working with them closely, but not necessarily on the materials budget.
Great.
Any other questions on this? Okay. I don't know why this happened. I apologize. If you see, this was doing some funky things. In the brochure, there's pictures of our Summer Reading Fest. I apologize that they're not showing up on screen.
That's fine.
But our programming is up across the board. We're increasing them. This year, the amount we've offered is up, and our attendance is up. I don't anticipate this going, increasing so dramatically next year because there's only so much time in the day and space. You know what I mean? It's hard to offer more programs. But in our program request, you'll see I did ask for some more money, but that's because programmers, the people presenting the programs are costing more. But we are getting the attendance. It has gone up since COVID. We've gone up steadily. And we are trying to expand services in North Haven. And two things we have are, actually, all of these programs listed here are at no cost to North Haven. We wanted to launch homebound delivery, and that's not something with our staff that we had the availability to do. And we had the opportunity to work with Sarah Inc., which they've changed their name. They're now Lumability, and they work with adults who have developmental disabilities. Their home base of their business is in North Haven, and they do have a few satellite locations. And so Lumability is working with us to do our homebound delivery. So on Tuesdays and Fridays, they pick up books and they bring them to homebound residents in North Haven. So it is limited to North Haven only. But it's been a fantastic service. So it's just been wonderful. We just hit 100 deliveries. So they call up and they order their books, and sometimes they just, put holds in, and then but sometimes they work with us asking for book selections. So it's wonderful. And if you're interested, there was a story that was on Channel 8 you can go watch. Eva Zamaris, no, I may have just messed her name up, came in and did a story about it. So you can go watch that story on Channel 8. It's really nice to see the guys from Sarah. And then our children's department applied for a grant through the Doug Flutie Foundation for autism, and we want to have autistic and sensory-based programming. So they're gonna, with the and we got the grant, so we're very excited. So we're gonna buy sensory materials so we can have these programs.
How much was the grant?
$4,400. I'm sorry, $4,200. And then we also got a grant through the Connecticut State Library for a self-care station, and that was $2,400. And we have people using the library who have low income or no income and are homeless. So they don't always have access to self-care materials such as like deodorant or soap or even hand lotion. So we're gonna set up a little station so they can come access these things. Even some of the teens who are like, shy and don't want to ask, they can just go and grab that stuff. So it will be in an area that's discreet, but that we hope doesn't go out the door. But we're very excited to be able to offer this. So all of these didn't cost us anything. All right, now on to the budget. This is just the same budget that you have. I've put it here, but I'm gonna go to the next page, which is my justifications. And they do align, and if it's easier for you, the next page has everything together. It has the budget line with the justifications next to it. So on lines 1 and 2 for personnel, the reasons we're asking for an increase are contractual obligations. Minimum wage has gone up, and our part-time pages get minimum wage, so that's a mandated by the state raise. I would like to raise our part-time clerks to $19 per hour. They haven't had a raise in, this will be 2 years come July, and they work very hard, and we just want to support them. And also within that, we are in the process of hiring, one of the positions that we have open now is part-time, but instead of a clerk, we're going to hire a part-time librarian, and they make a lot more money per hour. But the benefit to this is we don't need, it's not a union position, so it's a lot less hours, but we don't have to provide benefits. But the benefit to the library is that we have somebody responsible who can, close the building, and we really need an extra librarian, but this is like the happy medium of, so it's just a little bit more money per hour. Do you want me to go through all these?
You're saying there's an offset because the clerk would have gotten benefits?
The clerk, nobody gets benefits, but I'm not asking for a full-time position.
Yeah.
But we'll be able to have somebody who's responsible in the building without having to have that additional cost.
Okay.
So I have a quick question. As of January 1st, the minimum wage went up from $15.69 up to $16.35 per hour. So it's about a 4% increase. So is that what's reflected in your increases, or have you picked a number that's higher than minimum wage?
So the part-time line is made up of our pages which do get minimum wage, and that is in here, and then the $19 for the clerks who, and then also the extra money to fund the rest of the professional, well, the librarian position that's part-time.
That's the
It's a
thing that I
combo of
didn't
all three.
understand. Right. So the part-time library will be under
Under part-time position.
part-time as opposed to,
Yep.
got it.
Can we, okay.
Oh, please, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Summer staffing is up. In the last budget year, it was in a different line, and you'll see the little dash on your budget sheet, and that is within this budget line. It's just been a transfer. And also with everybody making more money per hour, it's just the cost of overtime has increased, but there's no change in hours within that budget. For building maintenance,
But can we just go
Yep,
back a second?
sure.
Is there a reason that we've combined summer staffing and overtime? Because I think it's never a good idea to combine anything with overtime, so.
well, it's because the way they get paid, the secretary gets paid, she's an annual salary, so it's like an overtime, it's essentially overtime for her to work that, so it's still overtime. It was just getting paid within its own line, and maybe Ingrid might be able to answer that if there's, we combined the,
Part of their last union contract, instead of getting a stipend or so much for meetings, it turns into salary, which reflects in overtime. I think you might not be following what Sue said. The commission secretary line got zeroed out, and she moved that dollars to summer staffing, which is overtime.
it really should be just renamed overtime as opposed to
Yeah.
summer staffing.
The
Summer
whole
staffing
line's
is
overtime.
overtime, but we can rename it.
Yeah, so it's just this one person
Yes.
that would be reflected in that line, as opposed to we have summer staffing, and then in addition to that, we also have this one position that also incurs overtime.
It's one person that has 5 meetings per year, but she's essentially getting overtime.
Right.
And really, we should just probably take out summer staffing and just call it overtime. So it is all correct.
So there's no other expenses during the summer other than this one person incurring overtime?
No. During the summer, all of our summer Saturday hours are paid with overtime for the library staff.
Okay.
And there is additional money, so if we do, like, if we have, if anybody calls in sick, I mean, very little extra money besides our Saturday hours, just in case we had to ask somebody to work overtime, which happens rarely.
Gotcha.
But that's the same amount as it was last year.
Saturday hours. Got it. Okay.
Building maintenance, we're running about the same, but we have a building management system that we needed to get back on contract. When I first started, they had made some updates, and they said you don't need an annual contract, and both Alex, our IT manager, town IT manager, and our HVAC company did ask us to get this back in order. It's just the management system, but it's a couple $1,000s per year, so that's an additional cost to the building line. Our air conditioning, the administrative offices, because we're the furthest away from any air conditioning, and we get the solar gain from the sun heating the bricks up, we literally will sit in the offices sweating. So, and then you walk out into the main library and everybody's cold. So there's a cost to put air conditioning splits in there, and then there's typical increase for repairs. Custodial contract, that's up because of minimum wage. Books and magazines and reference, that's our materials line. We did add some new databases. I talked to you about the high demand for Hoopla, which we do want to give, fund a little bit more. And typical increases for books are obviously, everything's going up. But I do like to have like a little bit in case we do see an extra database, but I mean, there's only like $1,000 in there built in for that. So those are the main reasons for the increase in materials. programmers, I mentioned it a little bit before. Presenter fees have gone up. We've had to actually turn away a lot, say we can't work with presenters because we just don't have the money to pay them the fee that they're asking. So, and we get a lot of free programs. So we already do get a lot of free presenters. We do have 3 departments splitting this budget. So it's teens, children, and the adult department. So that's the increase there. And then our Lion is split into 2 things that get paid here, Internet and Lion. Lion, it's your typical increase that I let everybody know about a few years ago. We had a 3.45 increase that was part of a 3-year plan that was a known thing, so that's built in. But our Internet, the state of Connecticut, we were getting an E-rate discount, which was a 50% federal discount. And the state of Connecticut managed the bid for the internet supplier. And the state library abruptly changed, like they actually sent out the letter to us saying, are you gonna have us represent you again this year? And I sent my letter in, and then within a week, they just said, oh, our grant ran out and we can't manage this anymore for you. So, unfortunately, we would have to apply for E-rate ourselves before we're doing it with all the state libraries. And doing a federal bid, there's quite a bit of liability, and it's not worth the risk. If we, I've heard some horror stories. So unless there's going to be group bidding, we're not going to be eligible for the E-rate discount again. Well, definitely not this year, and I don't know in the future. So that's why that rate is up. Does anybody have any questions about any of those increases?
Again, the custodial contract, the minimum wage only went up 4%, and yet the line item went up 7%. So is that just to have this additional wiggle room for emergencies, or?
That number, I believe, was provided by the town, but we do have a little wiggle room in case, like, we have accidents that somebody had and we need the custodian crew to come
Sure.
clean it.
Got it.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about any of those? Okay. So I'll move on to my capital request. And there's 3 things we're asking for this year in our capital requests. I told you we're working towards becoming more accessible to our community. And assisted listening devices are, we have a lot of people who struggle with hearing at our programs. And like, for instance, if you look around the room here, if somebody was having trouble hearing in the back of the room, there's not much you can do. With an assisted listening device, you can have a handheld device or your smartphone that would connect, and they can put a speaker in their ear and they can hear the speakers. The reason that this cost is as high as it is to do this is we have NHTV who does all the filming in the community room. And with all their equipment, we have to have equipment that would be balanced so that it didn't interfere, we wouldn't get feedback, we wouldn't have problems. And they film a lot of the town meetings. And we wanted to make the assisted listening device available for both library programs and town meetings. So
just
Yeah.
explain to me, I'm looking at the picture and I'm hearing you, and I'm asking myself, okay, if I have hearing issues, if I have a hearing aid in, why that doesn't suffice?
It's just, I don't know if it's the ambient noise, people struggle all the time. I mean.
So is this
yes.
for a meeting or a presentation, or what is this to be used for?
Any program that we had in the library, it basically would be like overhead mics that would pick up what's being said, and it would come through your, like a, an earbud or whatever you happen to put in.
But I guess what I'm saying is this for if I were to go to the library and there's a presentation, you say I'm there, and is it for when I'm listening to someone there?
Correct.
It's not to listen to a book through a device, right?
Oh, no. It's if you're sitting in the audience and you're trying to hear the presenter, but also at a meeting like this. So planning and zoning is on the first Monday of the month, and a lot of times people in the back just can't hear. So we would have like 4 units
Yeah.
that they can plug in, or if they just download an app on their phone, they
Right.
can plug in and then listen on their own.
This would be for 4 units? How
I
many
think-
units?
Well, I think it would be a 4-unit pack, but you can get as many people on your phones as possible.
Okay.
I'm sorry, again, I'm just looking at the picture. He's got an ear device in this picture, and he's got his phone in his hand. So to Bob's question, is the 25,000 for 4 devices? 4 ear?
It's the whole installation because of all of the upgrades that have to happen. They're gonna have to put in overhead mics to pick up what is coming through. It's to amplify.
No, I get
yeah.
that, but I guess the question is, how many people will this serve?
I'll have 4 handheld units, but
Right.
anybody who has a smartphone, can you put an app so the whole room can get on it if you have an app in a smartphone?
And then what, they're listening through their phone?
Yes, and you would plug the, either you would use an earbud or plug a, like just small earbuds, like right into your phone.
So I could go there with my earbuds. It would come in through my earbuds, but obviously through the phone and into my ear.
Correct.
I got it. Okay.
Yep. So yeah, there's a lot of technology that has to be upgraded in order for us to do
Right.
this.
Okay.
We were hoping that we could just do it, but if we did it just for library programs, then it wouldn't interfere with any of the TV stuff. So it's really because of that equipment, we have to do kind of a major upgrade on the back
Okay.
end. The next thing is a portable stage. We have picnic and performances on the lawn in the summer and our summer reading festival. And the stage we have now, I think, is about 15 years old or so. It gets stored at the Public Works building, and it's left out on the lawn because it's just a flat, it's not portable. So it stays there all summer, and we tarp it, and it's falling apart. And this one that we're looking at, we would be able to actually put out for the performance, fold up, put it away, and store it, and we can store it at the library. So that's what the portable stage is for.
So while this is going to require that I admit I've never been to the Summer Reading Festival, you couldn't do this in the new stage we have in the green?
No, we do it on the library lawn,
Right.
and we open up the whole library, and those pictures, unfortunately, that didn't show on the screen, it's around. But the picnic and performances are Monday nights, and we have like toddler type of, all ages, but,
Yeah.
they come in, and so they're on the lawn, the front lawn of the library.
Okay, thank you.
And then the digital kiosk, one of the biggest complaints that we get about the library is when they walk in, they don't really know where to go. And so we want to just make a wayfinding kiosk so that we can have it flashing with, program promotion, but it would be a directory to help people. It's just a little
Right.
bit more welcoming, a little bit more modern.
All right, thank you.
Yep. I did put in my 5-year capital requests. I don't necessarily need to go through those unless you'd like to, if you have any questions about them, what's in here.
Well, it's about what's not in there, the PC replacement. You don't need anything.
You know what?
Every year. you-
No, it's usually a 5-year. So last year was because we're adding some teen computers for when we do our construction, and we needed some PCs for the new teen space. But we were on about a 5-year plan, but working with Alex and IT, our computers are doing pretty well, so we pushed it off 2 years. So in 26, 27, we have PCs for the adults, and then you'll see, I'm sorry, in 28, 29, I pasted wrong. That is not supposed to be there. The numbers should add up correctly, but I don't need computers in 28, 29. The 27, 28 is for the children's department.
Okay, we're cutting that budget then.
You can cut my 28, 29 PCs. That one I'm okay with.
All right, thank you, Sue. All
You're welcome.
right, so overall, it's a 5% increase in the budget. Are there any questions from the members for Sue?
The roof is getting done in the
Yes,
spring.
you are anticipating my question.
Yes, it's coming.
The roo-
The roof is gonna be patched and repaired, and that will start once the weather is in decent enough shape for us to start that.
We don't want another swimming pool building adventure this time. We don't want any.
I'm gonna, if I have any good energy to put in the air, I'm gonna put that out there that we're not gonna have a problem like that.
Yeah.
And the
Okay.
elevator and front door have been working fine? Knock wood?
Yes,
Right.
yes. And we have regular maintenance on both.
Okay.
So we, yeah.
Yes, you've taken me through the interior and shown me a lot of the reallocation of space and the many changes you've made inside. So you're a great interior designer.
Well, next year it'll be even better once we go through our construction grant and the construction happens. It's going to be great.
Yeah, you do a lot with the space you have, and that lower level room gets used for a lot of town activities, a lot of meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And we do try to work with the communities, to make that room available, but.
and we hear sometimes, every time something comes down that trash chute, we hear it.
It's not a trash chute, it's a book return.
Oh, that's it.
It's for everyone else.
Let's not have it be a trash chute.
Thank you, Mr. Hallahan. I think your comments are sufficient for the day.
No, but, all right. No, but what's relevant here is that, you look at the 5% number that they're asking, and while we like 4s and 3s better, it only represents about, what is it, about $75,000? I'm sorry, the
75,000 is
the
enough.
whole, yeah, the whole number is 75,000 in additional funding from one year to another, and I think you've justified things pretty adequately today. So,
Thank you.
it's a nice presentation.
Thank you.
Very nice presentation.
Thank you.
Again, I still say the library is by far the best deal in town. So I really appreciate not only what, Sue, you do, and also the assistant director, but our board and all of your librarians and pages and clerks. It really is a fantastic service to this community for people of all ages. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That's what we try to be. Good, okay.
So before we wrap
Yes.
up, I just want to recognize the passing of one of your longtime board members, who was Phyllis Kasher, who passed away last year.
Oh, I
I know
didn't know.
Gina knew her, and I know Mike does too, but I know she was a longtime and loyal member of your board, so I just want to recognize her passing.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that she actually passed.
She did, thank you.
Yeah.
She was, lovely to work with and,
Yes,
and so
right.
passionate for the library.
Yes. She's
All
very
right.
involved in our town.
And, yeah, and thanks for running that Rotary Corner.
Yes. It's
All
going to
right.
be moving locations soon, but it'll be in a better spot.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue.
Welcome.
Would you like to stay where you are? Would you like to go to the microphone? And I have no doubt your presentation won't be anywhere near as strong as the one I just heard.
Of course not. I always said Sue was the best librarian this town's ever seen.
She's about to be the best finance director, I think.
We'll start where I think Michael will be the happiest, because he just mentioned it about those 2 and 3%. Recreation, overall, is pretty much a 0% change since last year's budget.
Let's just get us to the right page
Page
first.
35.
Thank you. Got it.
Okay. Basically, you have a $3,000 increase overall in their entire budget, of a $700,000 budget. Full-time reduced over 14%, part-time increased 4%, more in line with staying where it's actually been running. It seems like it's a line that's always a little higher with the concerts and such. The only other thing that changed for them was pool utilities and a custodial contract. Part of the reason for the reduction in rec in personnel and the increase in custodial contract is we had a maintenance person which retired and is not going to be replaced. We'll outsource to custodial. While the cost is maybe similar to what his wages would have been, there's no benefits.
It sounds like we're cutting a position at 60,000 and replacing it with a contract of 42, and that's not even including benefits. So I would say that's definitely a win, for sure.
The only other thing that really, as far as capital is related to rec, is they have a locker room HVAC system that the F&F is suggesting we deal with, which was for $55,000, in normal pool maintenance, which we have every year, for $35,000.
Sorry, Rich, are you on capital?
Yeah, just for them, just for rec. I figured I'd jump back and forth.
Just a second.
Page 38.
Page 38 for capital. They have HVAC that needs some work,
Ah,
and their normal pool maintenance, where we drain and clean and repair tiles. So rec basically comes out as pretty flatlined year to year.
The rest of these are community services, Rich, is that what it is?
Senior center, community service,
Yeah.
mostly senior center.
so the 35,000 under pool maintenance and repairs is actually these two different things you're mentioning. One is HVAC and for the locker room.
Yeah, one says HVAC. You see where it says pool locker room HVAC?
Yeah,
55,000?
55, yeah.
And then you have pool maintenance and repair, 35,000.
This probably come up last year, but why isn't that in a regular operating line?
It never has been in all the years we've done the budgets.
Yeah, I know.
I remember a decade back, it used to be 25,000.
Right.
I mean, we can start incorporating it into their maintenance, but it just easier way sometimes to track it. If you want, I can move it inside.
It's, I mean, unless there's something that I don't know about this, it's just regular.
Yeah, Ingrid's saying if there's a problem with getting it done in the fiscal year, we can encumber and carry it in our, as a capital item. We can't encumber it if it's in their budget itself. So if it's summertime and for some reason come July, they couldn't get it done and it went into August.
Yeah.
I could still carry it from that previous year.
Because it's a capital fund.
I didn't know, I didn't realize you can carry the capital.
We can encumber in capital items.
Yes, I thought, so they're not subject to the same 60-day rule.
No.
No, not capital, it's its own fund now.
So I have a quick question about pool chemicals and supplies. In 23-24, we budgeted for 25,000 and we only spent about 8,500. And let's see, and we're currently at about, in this fiscal year, about 5% expenditure. I'm assuming that that has something to do with the pool renovations, but I'm just
Right.
wondering if there's some wiggle room.
Nancy,
in
just
that.
so you know, as of January, we're at 72% on chemicals. So there's bills that caught up. The previous year could have been the fact that the pool was closed for a period of time. You don't have the most current, you only have through
Through November.
December. So in January, there was a $16,000 bill for chemicals. So we're really at 72% through January. Through 7 months of the year, they're hitting their number.
Okay.
Anything else on rec?
And the expected maintenance costs, you're expecting that, again, we were budgeted at 30,000 and we spent 60,000 in 23-24?
Well, currently, maintenance and rec is at 108%, and we're only 6 months through the year.
Right. So,
I think that's what she's asking, but it's low, what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Oh, you think it's low now?
well, I'm saying it was actually very high in 23-24. I don't know, what it's going to be for the remainder of this year, and I don't have a crystal ball for next year. So if you could help us to understand.
We flatlined it. It was double in 23-24.
Yep.
I'm not seeing anything out of the ordinary. We're back in line where I think it should be.
Okay. So 30 seems appropriate.
It's inappropriate.
That's my question.
And that there's a 0% increase.
Yeah, overall, their budget wrecked it and changed it all.
Yeah. Again, I'm just kind of looking at the predictor of 23, 24, budgeted versus actual, where they were actually over budget by about $20,000. So I don't really have a sense for what that's going to translate into this year, where we just have this increase of about 3,000. So,
I don't remember what happened special
I know
over there,
what that
23,
is.
was
We are
that?
charging the maintenance there, the maintenance
Oh, 23, 24?
currently, because we don't
Yeah.
have a position in,
Yeah, that's exactly it. The reason it was so much higher that year, that line item we just added for
Right.
custodial,
gotcha.
we didn't
So
have it in that
position was
budget,
still
so the
there.
only place
Right.
we could charge it to was maintenance.
Got it. And again, has this been kind of a rule across the board that we're eliminating commission secretaries?
No, the
Seems
union
like it.
contract requires that it's no longer a stipend, it's part of their
overtime.
overtime, so it's put into the line item for overtime, where it belongs.
So in each and every department,
Every
Yes.
department.
we're just eliminating it and putting it into overtime?
And eventually that line just disappears and moves into overtime. Once for a few years of not having it, we'll just zero out the line completely, won't even show on your reports.
Got it.
Well, but we have secretary, it is budgeted.
In this year, not
Yeah.
for next year,
Okay,
Little by little, they're disappearing everywhere.
okay.
including Board of Finance. Yep. And overtime is also quite high.
It's tracking where it's been. If you look at 23, 24, it was 25,127. We're asking for 25,000 and 25, 26.
Yeah, but in 23, 24, we budgeted 15, so.
I'm just
so
saying
we're
where it
saying
is.
Stay with that, even though
It's
it's
staying,
a,
it's staying in line with where the costs have been hitting.
got it. So that 23% increase is to reflect that year of overtime.
Yeah, it's just shy of $5,000.
And if I might add on this, that we've added concerts on the green, which have increased the staffing.
Right, that's what I assumed that was all about.
All right, Rich, why don't we go on to community services?
Community service. The biggest thing impacting their budget, dollar-wise, is personnel.
Sorry to interrupt, Rich. Page 33 for the
I'm
members.
sorry, 33.
That's right.
33, got it.
Their personnel had a 12% increase, overtime went down 27%, and dues and expenses went up 80%. Again, 80% is $2,000, and overtime is really only $1,500. The main difference is the personnel line. They are now fully staffed, and the other thing that makes it jump in this kind of sequence is that most of these people there are new, which means every contract, they're getting a raise and a step. There's been several retirements in the last year, year and a half there. There's, I believe, 4 counselors now.
Yes, for council.
There's, I'm trying to remember, I can give you a number. They have 142 clients. There's a small waiting list, but they are now servicing 142 clients. Energy assistance, we've taken 187 applications. I think we've already processed 149 of them.
So, Rich, I was curious on, so is the 4 counselors, is that an add to staff or not?
They were never fully staffed. There were people in and out fluctuating. Now it's fully staffed.
But why is the increase $50,000?
Because the people now are getting steps and raises. They're allowed to come in at a higher step than any of the other unions because they carry licenses. So while they come in a higher amount, they also still get their steps.
But whether they were in and out or not, we had the budgeted amount for 4 counselors last year. For
There
two-
was 3 there. We didn't have full staff. I don't know if we budgeted for what was there.
Right, but that's what I'm
I think we
saying, is
just
whether they
budgeted
were
for the
in and
staff
out.
that we had.
We had budgeted for 4 counselor 3s.
I think last year's budget, even though it might have said 4, if you look at the dollars, probably only, probably is 460. There's a, secretary was a change last year from senior clerk to secretary. You moved the position there. And the counselors went up, it looks like, $50,000, which would be a 2.5% raise in whatever a step is, probably on 3 or 4 people.
Yeah,
But there was counselors that were brought in that never got their step because they left. I mean, I'll give you a breakdown of each person, if that helps you.
Yeah, again, I'm just trying to understand, regardless of how many people were actually working, we had budgeted for 4 counselors.
Yeah, but we may have budgeted at a lower rate than we're paying them now.
Right, it's like a 19% increase.
Yeah, we
So
might-
even with steps, I'm still trying to understand how.
There might have been.
We have a meeting Wednesday, Rich. Could you just give us some
Yeah,
numbers, please?
yeah.
Sure.
I mean, it could be as simple as they might have brought someone in at a 2. Person didn't last, and they replaced it with somebody that's a 3, and then that's 3 is getting a step and a raise to a 4.
Rich,
We'll give you something for Wednesday's meeting.
Rich, what are the consultants? What are
They're
they?
counselors.
Oh, counselors.
They're the counselors that meet
Counselors,
with,
yeah, not consultants.
That hold the licenses.
they have, they carry licenses. The other thing that community service had 83 families for food distribution, which was about 5 more than the previous year, and 43 families representing 94 children showed up for toy distribution. The only other item that you might notice in there, that 10% increase, professional consultants, that's our contract with BH Care.
Do we still get a BH Care grant?
No, we get reimbursed for certain prescriptions through Medicare, but we don't get anything directly from BH Care anymore.
And Rich, I know it's come up before, but remind me what they do for us, please?
They're the ones that actually carry the overall license for the program to run.
Yeah, so let me comment. So that license would have cost us $25,000 if we didn't bring them in. They give us a certified, state-certified agency to oversee our division there, which adds the credibility at the state level, and it gives us a protection level by having that type of agency oversee the whole operation for us. And there is a revenue component to it, a reimbursement, as Rich said, which offsets some of the expenses.
90,000, I
But they
think.
also provide actual staff, or is that right? Actual
There's an
service?
actual staff person there, plus there's other programs that they can give our residents access to. I'm trying to think, is it 90,000 they probably brought in last year
Right, in revenue.
in revenue? Because
Yeah.
if it's a billable
Okay.
meeting, we bill for it.
Right.
Anything on community service?
Yeah, if we could just get the breakdown, that would be great, because
Sure.
I just see a big jump from 23-24 to 24-25 is 19%, and the previous year it was 12%. So if we could get a breakdown on that, that'd be great.
Senior center?
Next page, page 34.
Page 34. Again, the only significant items are contract-driven with personnel. We now have a senior center assistant manager there, Paulette, who has drastically changed the program even more. Actually, her goal is to at least increase by 100 members in the next year. She started the Q Club, which is a little pool table that's in there. Everything has been growing drastically
They had
there with her.
meals
They're
yesterday.
back to doing some meals. Her energy level is unbelievable. It now gives us that person that can institute some protocol changes, but we still now, the woman that was trying to fill 2 roles at the time, Mary, can still now just focus on programming. Judy is still involved with the town. She's basically the part-time that's in there. That number may or may not fluctuate a little bit lower, but she is acting as municipal agent for the town. The other small items, overtime, they are planning more and more events with the seniors. Some of them require us to be out a little bit after hours, so we increased our overtime, or basically doubled our overtime, another $1,200.
Can we just stay with the staff for 1 second?
Sure.
So the assistant senior center manager is going from 72 to 89.
Yeah.
I do see the program coordinator is going down. So what's the dynamic there?
Yeah.
Well, the program coordinator that was listed in last year's budget, we were paying her above scale, not to the full manager's level, and was taking care of some of the administrative work, and Judy was still involved with overtime. That's why the part-time was 49, but I think we even exceeded that. Now that we have Paulette becomes the senior center assistant manager. Mary goes back to her initial position she was hired for, which was the program coordinator. And obviously, we have the senior clerk and the bus driver.
Who's the manager, senior center?
Paulette.
So she gets that
Oh,
extra?
I'm sorry, the manager, that's me, that's my stipend.
Oh, that's your stipend, okay.
Paulette is running senior center day-to-day. Mary is doing the programming over Paulette's guidance. Keith does the bus. Matter of fact, you'll see that our bus maintenance number went down 35%. The new bus is there. We're not expecting as much repair. We dropped the number.
I could say the place is booming.
Oh, yeah.
Paulette let AARP tax aid use a room 2 days this past week, and the place was packed every day, the 2 days we were there.
The turnaround I've seen in the last year has been dramatic. There's more and more seniors going there. Paulette has some relationships with some of the other senior housing, which is even gaining more people. They're seeing it as, it's not a place to get dropped off. It's a place where there's activities. You come when you want to come, leave when you want to leave. One of the things in the capital request is the kiosk, so we can better control who's there, who's going to sign up for which program, just to manage it a little bit better. The software they have is beyond obsolete. I don't remember, yes.
Yeah, I just want to comment on Paulette. Paulette came to us from the Pool Road Senior Housing Facility, which is a HUD facility. So what Rich is referring to is that what we've been trying to do here for years is connect all of these senior housing, whether it's HUD, CHAFA, to direct them to the Senior Citizen Center, because we have these robust activities there. So what Rich is referring to is those housing units on Pool Road. She's been able to attract some of the seniors to go to our senior center, because at those housing units, yes, there are some activities, but they're not as I said, robust or vibrant in terms of the number of activities that the Senior Citizen Center offers. So Paulette comes to us with a great deal of experience from a HUD facility.
Yeah, between the pool hall they have in there and their bocce courts outside and the different physical activities or meals that they do or holiday bazaars, the place is getting more and more active. And Bob, you called it.
Yeah.
You go there now, there's a lot more people. And you're seeing a lot more younger people. I mean, Fran Bartlett, who's my new girlfriend, I swear. Is she 94?
She's 90. She's great. If she's watching, Fran, thank you for what you do there. You're really one of the leaders at the Senior Citizen Center.
She is in better shape than I am. I think she's sharper than anyone I've ever met. But, at one point, the senior center was a lot of older people. Paulette's attracting those 60-year-olds.
You don't dare get in the
Yeah,
way
we
of
can make
bingo
it.
people.
Tim, we can make it.
You don't want to
See,
get
you're
in the way of the
describing my
bingo
future.
people.
Yeah, don't get away to bingo people.
And I'll leave you with one final thought. During COVID, the senior center participation really dropped significantly and dramatically. And when you have seniors that are disenfranchised, and I know this having, when my mother was alive, they become sort of isolated. And that's kind of one of the worst things to happen to a senior citizen. So by bringing them back like we have, with the numbers growing, we can make a good argument as a community that we're really providing a great service for our seniors, and to keep them mentally active, in some cases physically active with some of the things we do there. And I think it's a wonderful thing for those seniors. So.
And there's a lot of outside volunteers in there as well. I mean, Fran does a lot, and even Bob and Bill do taxes for the seniors.
We've expanded that program this year.
Yeah. As far as capital for them.
One more question,
Sure.
Rich. The senior clerk, why is that so high?
Senior clerk is it's Lori. It's
16%.
whatever it is.
Went up by 16%.
That's what?
It's contract, Lori.
That's a contract?
It's.
Oh, contractual,
it's a
sorry.
contract,
It's contractual, sorry.
All the labor numbers are contract driven.
So that's got to be a step increase or something?
Could be, yes. Yeah, she's not at the max, I don't think, yet.
Okay.
So, again, just to chime in on here, I completely agree that the senior center is a very valuable resource in our town, and I think everyone on this board supported the 51% increase in the budget from 23-24 to the current fiscal year. I'm just trying to understand, like the chair, each one of these new positions. So it seems like Paulette's position didn't exist in 23-24, and she was brought on in the current fiscal year, and her bump up in salary, it looks like, is about 23%. And then likewise, the program coordinator was there in 23-24, had a 17% increase for the current year, and then a drop of 10%. And then likewise, the senior clerk had a slight increase from last year to this year, but then a 16% increase for the proposed year. So,
Well, but last year was a transition year because we had, the former director went into a part-time role, right?
She went into part-time role.
Right, and so, I forget all the machinations, but there was some movement in the duties and the dollars last year too, I remember.
Exactly. We did not have, and we can see what the budget was last year, we didn't have someone in Paulette's position. So we took the program coordinator, paid her above her scale to fill in while we were looking for someone. We only brought Paulette on board a few months ago, was it? I know,
Yes.
2-3 months ago?
October, I think.
Yeah. So the program coordinator at the time was getting paid a little bit more because they were doing more duties, but now with Paulette there, they can go back just to their normal duties, which is why she dropped down to 57.
All right, on the expenses, Rich, were there other comments you want to make about expenses?
Well, we talked about the bus, which was a 35% drop. Building maintenance repair, we went up to 10,000. If you look at 23-24, we spent over 17,000. We're getting the buildings up to par. The biggest thing for them is in capital. They could always use additional chairs, some interior painting. Paulette is interested in doing.
We had a request for chairs last year, did we not? I didn't bring my budget, unfortunately.
Some of them we got, some we didn't.
Yeah.
Judy ordered what she thought was a perfect chair. It came.
it was
She
not-
wasn't happy with it. We sent it back.
Okay.
And some of those purchases were made using ARPA money, correct? For the chairs?
I don't believe
No.
the chairs were, no.
No.
No?
I don't think chairs were ARPA at all.
I think that was the original plan.
As I said, one of the items I'd like to see with communities, with the senior center, is that software kiosk. Alex will help us out, give us some more support, but if we can get the software up and running with them to expand their database, to make it easier for seniors to sign up for things, to know who's coming in the building and when they're coming in the building, that would just make programming an easier thing to evaluate.
Is this an app on the phone, Rich, or is this something?
No, it's an actual kiosk. So we'll have a computer there. Alex will give me the hardware I need.
Yeah.
I need the software.
So you'd have to actually physically go there and sign up for a program?
Yeah, but if you were coming in, you would scan a barcode, or you would
Yeah. Right.
put something in, they know you're there, and there could be programs listing, you say, I want to take the bus trip to here.
Right.
And it's compared to something it's probably 20 years old over there,
Yeah.
some software.
Okay.
I want to give Paulette the tools she needs to expand as quickly as she can. Her energy level is through the roof. I want to keep it there.
I think it's money well spent.
Yeah, there is a great group of people there, really. I never really interfaced with them before. Hell of a group of people there.
Won't be long.
Won't be long. Let's see what I have to put up with. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo those points, and again, just looking at the numbers, it almost seems like we need a little bit more money in event and programs and arts and crafts instruction, just based upon the utilization in the current fiscal year. So that might be something to think about.
As they build, we can adapt.
Any other questions for Mr. Monaco on the Rec Center, Senior Center, Community Services?
I've known Paulette for years, and I didn't think we could ever replace someone with Judy's energy, but it happened.
Yeah, no,
So
she was a really good find.
we're good.
In the few years I've been with the town, I've been lucky, hitting a few people, one of them being Paulette, another one being Ingrid, that you brought people in at a level and ability that isn't usually found at, someone entering into an organization. Usually you're doing a lot of training, and you got people that hit the ground running. It just makes it better for the town.
All right, thank you, Rich. Let's take a 5-minute recess before we start with the fire department. Okay, we are back from our recess. It's still January 11th, Saturday morning, and we're going to hear from the fire department. Before we do that, I think it's a good time to recognize what's going on. I don't think there's anyone in this country who doesn't know about the fires that are going on in Los Angeles County, and what I'm sure are the heroic efforts of all the fire and the emergency personnel that's going on out there. And we've always been fortunate to have a fantastic fire department led by our Chief Januszewski, and although we're also fortunate not to have the kind of fires that are going on in LA, I think it's important to recognize the efforts of their fellow brethren out in Southern California. With that, Chief Januszewski, please go right ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate that acknowledgement. We continue to kind of monitor it ourselves, and we're in touch with some people that we know in that area as well. So thank you. I'll bring you through the proposed budget for 25-26 fiscal year. I want to start with a couple of line corrections that I think the Board of Finance will be pleased with, and there are 2 reductions. So obviously, since December 2nd, which I believe this budget was due for, and today, I do have 2 changes. One is a reduction in the EMT training line. It is going to remain at $48,000 and not be $78,000, and so we can revert back to what that line has been. The second is the contractual replacement staffing line can be reduced by $37,060. And so I'll have that new number for you, which is 1093932. So again, it's a $37,060 reduction. And that is because we had 2 retirements that occurred in the month of December, and so that changed the calculations for the contractual staffing for the next fiscal year because of the number of vacation days that were associated with those retired members. And so we're starting off with reductions. So moving forward, I like to always spend some time on what's changed since our last workshop. A couple of things. I really got to continue to plug our community emergency response team, our CERT team, led by some incredible volunteers. You see them in every concert, you see them at a lot of public events, and I have pictured here some of the different scenarios that they are asked to participate in over the last year. We've even had them now start to go to some of our structure fires. They have a robust enough team and an active team that they're coming to our fires, and they're providing some scene support in terms of rehab So when it's really cold outside, a nice cup of coffee from firefighters is what they're looking for. When it's really hot, they have cooling chairs that we can sit inside and be rehabbed and try to come back to be able to continue to operate in a reasonable amount of time. And so the CERT team continues to do phenomenal things for this town. We've seen some significant operational changes with our volunteers, which I'm going to cover later on in the workshop. We have taken delivery of 2 engines that were delivered just in the last couple of months, really. These engines were ordered in 2021, and it took us that long to be able to receive them. So the inherent delays associated with the backlog of fire apparatus is, unfortunately, we succumbed to that. But 3.5 years later, we do have those 2 new engines, and that has stabilized our fleet. And 2024 continued to be one of our busiest years on record. Furthermore, we continue with some remodeling on the Northeast Station thanks to a grant by Quinnipiac University of $300,000. So pictured are the pictures really just from this past week. They have changed a little bit from the last workshop. We do have work continuing in that station, particularly on the 2nd floor. Some modifications being made to a 1st floor bathroom, which needs modifications to accommodate female firefighters. But otherwise, that station is well underway. We're moving forward with some plumbing and some carpentry. It's going to continue to need things like radios installed, light activations, monitors, computers, that type of thing, so that we can operate. But that is a 2nd floor that has remained untouched in the last 12, 13 years. It was uninhabitable. And so we continue to move forward with that as well. I'm going to move into some operational budget line increases. Some of these are pretty easy to explain. The overtime is increasing by $28,590, and that is to compensate for a wage increase, and also because we are calling upon firefighters off duty to come into work more often to be able to cover some of the simultaneous incidents and some of the times that we have multiple large fires occurring. And so with that overtime line is kind of the discretionary overtime line, if you will. It's the time that we get to call in firefighters to cover those incidents or for large storms, things of that nature. And so that line needs to increase to accommodate that flexibility. Beyond that, the contractual replacement staffing line is a line that we've had now in the budget for some period of time. That is a direct result of the number of vacation time within the bargaining unit, the sick time usage, and the estimation that we try to make on sick leaves, injury leaves, prolonged leaves where we have to cover the shifts for overtime. I think one thing that I want to make sure that we talk about is there is a savings incurred from having 2 shifts staffed at 11 and dropping down to 10. And so again, on all 4 shifts, we maintain 10 firefighters minimum staffing. 2 of those shifts have 11. And so when those 2 shifts have a vacancy, we don't need to call an overtime right away. But so we always have that one, if you will, and I hate to say this word, but extra person, so that we don't need to incur overtime. That savings is factored into that line. There seems to have been some confusion over the last year. It seems like there were some people who are looking for the savings to be incurred in that line at the end of the year. We've built that savings into the line. $90,000 a shift comes out to about $180,000. And we've been able to show that actually has incurred some savings, because every time those shifts with 11 have a vacancy, we don't need to call back overtime. That's a savings.
So, Chief, I have 2 questions. One about the overtime. I'm sure you'll agree, historically, overtime is one of those line items that is historically underspent by the fire department, thankfully. Thank you. And so, again, with respect to the overtime line, in 23-24, you were underspent by about $10,000. This current year, as of the end of November, in theory, it should be at 42%, and you were at about 30%. So is there something specific about next year that you're anticipating will be unique that will require additional overtime?
There is. If we can cover it, I can cover it now, or I can cover it in a short time, whichever way. I just don't want to get us too off track here, but I do anticipate having to reuse that line more often than we are now. Okay.
And in terms of the contractual replacement staffing, again, you can either address it now or address it later. again, this is a line that's typically overspent year to year, and in 23-24 it was over by about $118,000, and this year you're at about end of November, right on track, or a little bit under, actually, 37%. So for the last year anyway, how many shifts have you had in which you've had, for those 2 shifts in which you have 11 people, you've had 11 people as opposed to 10?
Over the course of 2024? Probably most of 2024, those shifts had 11 people assigned.
So then what would you do with that extra person in
Well,
2 of the shifts?
Yeah, so they would be assigned to an apparatus and respond with that apparatus.
Okay, so then it's not the case that you had, 90% of the shifts, you had somebody calling in sick or on vacation or something like that, in which you'd have to use that extra person?
No, in fact, I provided to the Board of Finance several months back the numbers showing the savings incurred. I believe it was, I don't know what it was now, but it was a period of time where we showed that we were saving in excess of $90,000 on those 2 shifts, at least on 1 shift.
I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. You're asking how many times or are you asking how many times in a shift did we actually only have 10 out of the 11?
I'm saying for those 2
How many times
shifts.
did it actually replace, did someone call out, or there was able to have, there were 10 instead of 11 people working? Is that what you're asking?
I'm saying for those 2 shifts,
Yeah.
because there's 4 shifts, 2 of them we have staffing for 10,
Right.
2 of them we have staffing for 11.
Right.
For those 2 shifts in which we have staffing for 11, how many times in the last year have we had 11 people actually show
Working.
up for
So how
work?
many times did you not need to replace?
Not need to replace anyone.
That's what I think.
Right,
she's
that's what I'm
asking.
trying to answer. So we provided that, I don't have that data available for you right now, but in the past, we've been able to show, and that's not gonna change, right? The occurrences and the frequency of 10 firefighters taking time off from year to year is gonna stay relatively the same, month to month, year to year. We don't really see many changes in that, which is why you don't see big changes in the contractual replacement staffing line, because that's a pretty good estimation in terms of you take how many sick days are being used in the bargaining unit, you take how many vacation times they have allotted, and you take an estimation on long-term injury, long-term sick, and you come up with that number. Now, every time that shift of 11 has somebody who's out, we don't call back overtime for that one shift if it's only 1 person, because our minimum staffing is 10. And I provided some data to the Board of Finance because at the time that I provided, 1 shift had 11 firefighters assigned for a very long period of time. It was in excess of a year, and the Fire Commission was aware of it as well, and it showed over $90,000 in savings.
Okay. Tim, are you aware of this data? Because I certainly haven't seen this data, and I remember you providing us this data maybe 2 years ago, in which you had a half a year's data and you projected for the second half of the year. Does that sound familiar, Tim?
It did go to Tim after the budget workshop last year.
Yeah, I think, I was say, Paul said a couple months ago, but I think it was after the budget workshop last year. Look, I understand the question, Nancy, but in theory, I think we all understand. I mean, there's 11 people on the shift, and as Paul said, you've got sick days, time off days, other reasons why some might not be there. And in those cases, there is a savings because we're not having to use the contractual staffing. We're just using 10 people on a shift.
Yeah, but we're paying for 11.
We have them on the staff anyways, Nancy. I mean.
Yes, I understand. So I'm trying to understand, how do you calculate a savings if you're paying for 11?
Because
You
if
can
we only
gauge
had,
that.
if we only had 10, he'd have to bring someone onto the shift at, the replacement cost, which is overtime, right? And that's the savings.
Right.
If you're not doing that, you're saving the cost of the overtime. So I understand the theory.
Yeah, so I'd have to see this data. So I haven't seen it, so if you could share it with me, then that would be.
I'll share it with the chairman.
That would be great.
Thank you.
So I'll cover your other question regarding the overtime and why that's going up in a short period of time. I have a note here to myself. Regarding some additional operational budget lines, the EMT line needs to be increased by $20,000. That's due to a contractual requirement. The medical supplies, we have not increased the medical supply line now in 2 fiscal years. As we know, with everything else, medications continue to increase. They all have a shelf life associated with them. The same justification we've used for increasing this line in the past, we need to do it again. It's been 2 years. The other thing that's worth noting as well is we have a lot of electronics. Obviously, medicine's become very electronic dependent. Things like our cardiac monitor, things like our automatic compression device that we carry in to do compressions on CPR patients. Those are very heavy electronics. And when I say heavy, they're very reliant on all electronics. Those require service plans to be able to maintain and service, and if we need to send one out, they send us a replacement so that we're not running out and changing our operations. And so those service plans all have costs associated to them that are continuing to rise. And so that's the reason for that line also to be increased. Vehicle maintenance line, we need to look at increasing this line as well. This line has been stable for the last 1, 2, 3, 4 fiscal years, but we need to look at increasing this line because we have apparatus that are continuing to age. Every single one of our apparatus are maintained by outside vendors. We have no in-house mechanics, we have no in-house maintenance. And so we have 2 different vendors that we go back and forth between depending on the apparatus, really 3, but I'm gonna say 2 for the most part. And we are at the mercy of those costs increasing, those labor costs, those every time that we need a part, the parts are increasing, we pay a premium on the part as well. And so that is a line that needs to be increased so that we can continue to maintain the fleet that we have and keep it in service at all times. That includes all of the engines, the ladders, the rescues, the admin vehicles, the CERT vehicle, which I just mentioned, which is an old retired bus, some off-road vehicles, and so forth.
Chief, I have a quick question about that. Obviously, we had a big blip in 23-24 of $245,000 actual, because you have the budgeted amounts listed here. So compared to the 160 that was budgeted, so for that year and any of these years, how much of this repair and vehicle maintenance is due to any type of collisions that take place on the highway, and would those expenditures ultimately be reimbursed from the insurance company?
It's a good question. So nothing in the last year that I can recall was involved collisions on the highway. The biggest expense that we had that you're seeing in the last year was that we were paying $3,000 a month for a leased fire engine until we had the 2 new engines arrive. And so that was one of the reasons why that line was also, the last couple of years has been very high, is because we incurred that expense to maintain our fleet. But we've had no apparatus that were involved in any collisions on the highway that I can recall in the last year and a half, and so that shouldn't be a reason for the increase in cost. And if we did have, to answer the other part of that question, if we did have that, it's up to finance. We pay the premium, we pay the $10,000, whatever it is, on the cost share, and then usually insurance reimburses us the rest. But there's a couple different variables there.
Right, but sometimes there's a lag. So you have to pay out of pocket, and then you get reimbursed, so it's just a question of...
Yeah, I don't believe that's happened in the last year and a half. The other line that we're looking to increase is the building line. This line is a line that I know it gets a lot of attention sometimes, but I want to get into, on the slide here, a few of the things that this line goes towards. We have 14 plus overhead doors, and again, those contracts, that service is not cheap by any means, especially when we have something that breaks. We can't just have an overhead door that's not repaired for 3 weeks. You know, we need to get it repaired in the next day or two at a minimum, so that we have fire stations that are secure and apparatus that can get out. And so things like that cost a lot of money. We have obviously 4 kitchens, 3 kitchens really, but we're going to have a 4th soon. Plumbing, compressors, exterior lighting. I get people all the time that go by a station and they say, geez, the lighting is out or it's flickering. Yeah, and every time that we have to repair that, we're paying an outside vendor to come in and provide that expense at a premium for us to be able to do that. And so some of these things we're constantly trying to wrestle with and looking at the budget and see what we can afford. Air conditioning units, HVAC systems are specific to manufacturers in some of these cases. Some of the stations have HVAC systems that were installed during a remodel that I can only get serviced by one company. And so that's an expense. The other thing is, if you look at the Plymovent systems, what's a Plymovent system? Well, every time the fire apparatus starts in the bays, there's a hose that comes down that connects to the exhaust to keep carbon monoxide and other contaminants from getting into the stations. Those are used a lot. Every time the engine comes and goes, the apparatus comes and goes, that is automatically disconnecting, and when it comes back in, it has to be manually connected again. Those systems are very cost-dependent in labor to be able to repair. Then we have things like an elevator and commercial hoods and fire extinguishers that all need to be maintained, sprinkler systems. And so when you factor all that in, we need to continue to maintain the 4 stations that we have. 2 of them, let's not forget, 2 of them are the original stations from the 1950s. One half, right, is new, but the other half was not touched during the remodel at all 12 years ago. And so there's 1950s components in there that we need to maintain. Now, the other piece to keep in mind here is that a linen expense alone that we have to incur is a $22,000 expense for linens. So, I can't control that. And so those are the kind of things that we need to look at to be able to maintain, to be able to keep this line where it is. Moving forward on the quick operational line increases, $5,000, which is again a contractual requirement increase to cover the cost of uniforms that continue to rise. And then technology. So we talked about technology a little bit with the medical line, but this line right now is serviced by, supports essentially 3 different functions. The first is what we call the First Due system. We talked about this a couple years back at a finance meeting where we talked about one particular program was being sunset and we needed to move to another program. We did so. It's called First Due. It does everything for us, from payroll to shift filling, so that you're not manually having to call people on the phone to try to fill shifts, so it's automated, fire inspection records, hydrants, etc. That program alone is a $32,000 expense every year. You can find that if you dig into the details on my technology line. You'll find where that cost is paid for. The other is electronic patient care reports, otherwise known as an EPCR. We call the program ESO, and it is our charting, our documentation for all patient care that our paramedics and our EMTs have in the field, and it also takes care of our EMS billing, and it integrates with the hospital so that we get feedback on the patients that we bring to the hospitals and that we care for, so that we can see differential diagnosis and so forth moving forward, so that it makes our EMTs and our paramedics better. And so that's a $10,000 a year expense. And then if you look at the iPads that are in all the apparatus, so that we have access to vital information on the way to incidents, to maintain those with cell phone coverage and so forth, so that we have access all throughout town, that expense is almost $17,000. And so when you add all of those up, we're at $58,800, and the line is only $47,500. So we've got to be able to increase that line to continue to support the technology that we have in the department.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So the iPads, are those like new, updated, like, I'm sure IT must be maintaining, or you guys maintain?
IT does a great job. And so we went away, we used to have Tough Books. I think it was a Microsoft product, and they're almost like brick suitcases. And so those, we went to iPads when I became chief. They're a fraction of the cost. A Tough Book is in the neighborhood of $2,500. I can get an iPad for $400. It's the purchasing of the iPads and the service and the constant cell phone coverage needed for all of those.
So are these iPads like all purchased at one time, or do they recycle them? I'm trying to get, like, are they aging?
They're recycled. They're constantly being, because some are used more frequently than others. Some of the charging systems do a better job than others, and some of the apparatus. And so it's just the ongoing expense of having those.
Thank you.
So Paul, if cell service or internet service goes down, something like an iPad or other communication devices, what do we have as a backup? Is the satellite?
We don't. And so the iPads, the phones, some of your recent iPhones right now will go to satellite. In fact, if you haven't played with it yet, download the newest iOS, and when you have no service, it'll tell you to point your phone to the satellite in the sky, which is pretty cool.
Really?
On the iPads, we don't have that yet.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is the cell towers that we have in town have generator backups, and they'll go for about 2-3 days.
Oh, okay.
So we don't typically experience that. We only have some cell dead spots in town, but it's pretty quick.
Yeah, okay.
We'll move on into capital requests. That covers the operational requests. I'm going to go in order as they appear in the 5-year capital plan. My ongoing plea for renewing our admin support vehicles, which are typically the 3 chief officers, but then we take those vehicles and we filter them down to the fire marshal's office or whoever else needs them. Nancy, I know you did a study last year on the number of town vehicles in every department, and I'm sure that you saw we had one of the departments with the least number of town vehicles. But nonetheless, we have 3 town vehicles that do need to replace on a regular basis, and those are assigned to myself and 2 deputy chiefs. I believe that we're one of the only departments in town that require that somebody is on call 24 hours a day in response to all major incidents in town. In order to do that, we need to have vehicles that are dependable and new enough to be able to respond to those scenes. And I have pictured here again a good example of what's in the back of these vehicles, so that when we arrive on scene, we can manage the incident. We can manage our own personnel. We can manage personnel that might be coming in from other towns. We have the ability to be able to control accountability and talk on our radios, and actually, at the same time, in some cases, be able to manage whatever else is going on in town. So there is 1 chief officer that is on call 24 hours a day. Typically 2 to 3 are available on any given time, but nonetheless, they respond to a number of incidents throughout town, and we need to have vehicles to be able to maintain their operations. Moving on, we have to look at replacing a rescue. It's a licensed ambulance by the state of Connecticut. It's a $275,000 expense. It would be a capital request. This has been identified in a 5-year capital request now consistently every year. What we're looking to replace is a 2013. It's a Ford F-450 chassis, and it is again, it's a licensed ambulance. It does have just about 85,000 miles on it. So yeah, mileage-wise, not too bad, right? What we don't have on here is engine hours, which is much higher. And the other thing to keep in mind is this is a 2013. And so it is out of service. It was out of service 42 days during 2024. It was not available to us because it was in the shop being repaired. And it was placed into service 62 times during 2024. The reason for that is because we take the main rescue that we have, which is a 2020, and we take it out of service basically every Tuesday. And we put this one in service. And that's to keep things moving, right? Because we don't use something for a while, it breaks. That gives us Tuesdays to always plan to be able to maintain the 2020 rescue that we have. And so that compensates for Tuesdays and then some other times that the main rescue may have been down or needed a repair. And so 62 different times, Rescue 2 was placed into service in place of Rescue 1. That's what Rescue 2 is here to 2013. What I don't have identified for you are the number of times that it was used for callbacks. So again, long duration incidents that we know that career staff are going to be tied up for an extended period of time on. We will call back career staff from their homes off duty to come back to town to work a shift. And at that time, the rescue is one of those apparatus that we frequently try to fill so it can respond to the medicals that are occurring in town while the on-duty shift is tied up. And so that apparatus is used for that purpose. How often does a rescue get used? Well, the 2 rescues together in 2024 responded to 2,071 incidents. During 2024, it also provided 183 times ALS transport or an ALS intercept, meaning it assisted the ambulance to the hospital for our paramedics to be able to provide vital patient care. And so these 2 rescues are vital to our operations. We need to have at least 1 in service at all times. 2 is great because it allows us to be able to have a reserve, able to plug in whenever we need, and also for that purpose of callback.
So Paul, I noticed, and you said, of course, in your earlier comments, that the lead time on getting vehicles is 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and
Yeah.
it's noted here in the capital plan. So this number that you put in here for 275, if you were to put an order in today, I'm assuming they don't hold the price for that length of time. How does that work?
You know, it's interesting. Ambulances, for whatever reason, don't seem to have the extended time for delivery that fire apparatus does right now.
Okay.
So we're not seeing that. There's a lot more options with ambulances. You can go with a Dodge, a Ford, a Chevy chassis, and
Yeah.
so forth. Mercedes even has one. So there's not as much of a concern with this in terms of delivery.
So do you think you could actually get it in within the next fiscal year if you got
do.
the appropriation in the spring?
Yes, sir.
You do, okay.
So I have a question regarding this for Mr. Frieda. I'm fairly certain in the original list of ARPA expenditures, we had a line item for $242,000 for an ambulance. Is that something that we can utilize here?
Well, all that money is consumed right now, and we've already reported to the federal government, so So there's no more money available, if that's the question.
Well, it was, the list that you gave me via Val sent to me last year had an ambulance listed. So you removed the ambulance and.
Did we buy it, Paul? I don't recall. We bought it.
I think we purchased
Yeah,
it.
we did purchase it.
So is
There's
that
a
the
2020?
2020?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that money was about $242,000. It was on the list, we reported it to the federal government, and that's.
Okay, so that's the 2020
That's the
ambulance that
2020.
we're talking
Yes.
about. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Moving forward to capital request, I have on here a training center, security and fencing. What that is we requested it last year as well. If you haven't been up to the training center that we're constructing behind Northeast, I encourage you to do so. The 5-story training tower that you see pictured there has really revolutionized what we're able to do in terms of firefighter training. We have in there various sets of stairs and the ability to do different types of searches and so forth. And so it's giving our firefighters the ongoing training that they need to be the best that they can be every day. The 3-bay garage, which is to the right of that picture, was just recently constructed, and that's allowed us to be able to start to store a lot of equipment, a lot of assets there. But we are seeing, and we knew this problem when we started to, if you will, use this land, use this property, is that there's a lot of loitering taking place there. We see a lot of evidence of drinking, of drug use in the area, and so what we don't want to have happen is we don't want our buildings vandalized or our apparatus vandalized and not have secure fencing around it and not have cameras in place as not only a deterrence, but be able to document anything so that we can pursue anything that we have to pursue. The other item there is a training center hydrants. We've consistently asked this through capital the last couple of years. The hydrants are the only thing that we knew all along that this property was going to need for town infrastructure. It had everything else. It has a station there with bathrooms. It has the parking. It had the ability to be able to put a lot of buildings back there and not have to worry about any impact from zoning. We have 3-phase power that we were able to bring in from UI, which is pretty substantial power to be able to run air compressors. The one thing that it needed was water, and we cannot operate at 100% on this property right now because we don't have water. Now, are we letting fires back there? No, not too often. But our firefighters still need to have access to be able to work the pumps, be able to, navigate through how to operate fires with all of the knobs and the levers and so forth that are on our engine panels. To do that, we need to be able to hook up to water. Firefighters need to be able to practice with streams and water coming out of hoses so they know what it feels like. They can move with it. They can go up the set of stairs that are in those towers. We don't have water. And it's the one thing that we need in that site in order to be able to make that site truly operational. Right now, when we still need to do live fire training, which is a requirement for us per OSHA, every year we have to go somewhere else. We have to go to a different town in order to be able to provide that training to our firefighters. And we can do it right here if we just had hydrants. Now that expense has gone from $37,500 in 2021 to $170,000 today. So I anticipate that cost to continue to go up, but we do need to look at putting hydrants in. We've already have the water main that was brought right to the curb of Northeast, and it's ready to go. Just needs to get brought back into the grounds.
So that's the cost to run a line from Washington Avenue to the rear of the property?
With 2 hydrants.
With 2 hydrants. Wow, that's expensive.
It's very expensive.
Yeah.
And it's only gone up. I don't know why. We challenged the last quote we have for $170,000. We pushed back and we said, how to go up so much? And it's everything else.
Does the water company do this, or who does this?
So the water company can do it. There's other contractors that can do it that are authorized to do it through the water company. The next item is we need to bolster our ability for brush fires. And so if you look at this past year in 2024, we had the driest season on record. I was more worried for several weeks there about brush fires than I was house fires in town. Because I knew that with every brush fire that came in, it could potentially spread to a number of houses. And the number of personnel that we need to be able to obligate towards brush fires, it might blow your mind just in terms of that. In some cases, we need more firefighters at a brush fire than we do a house fire because it's just so large and we have to get there and it's so time consuming. And then you're basically hiking in the woods for a period of time trying to get to wherever the fire is. Sometimes it's in the middle of the night. We had 2 substantial brush fires last year that quite honestly I've never seen in 23 years that I've been here. One was on Peters Rock that had a very good ability to be able to burn some homes down on Hermitage and Middletown Avenue. And the second was Upper State Street around Hanson Pond area, that area. It was really getting close to some homes there as well with the wind and how dry it was. Right now, our current operations for brush fires consist of what's on the left side of your screen. We have 2 John Deere Gators. They're set up. One is much older than what's pictured here, but they were both, this one here was donated, and it's set up to be able to bring a firefighter into the woods, right? One driver, bring a firefighter in the woods, drop the firefighter off, and that's it. It also has a Stokes basket on the back, which is what that yellow piece is, kind of extending off the back, so that we can, it was predominantly provided to us to be able to take care of the fallen hiker, somebody who gets injured that might be off Valley Service Road or Peters Rock, and be able to get them down into safety. It was not, nor is it built for any kind of brush fire. It doesn't have the ability to carry any kind of payload. So instead, what we have to use is what you see pictured there are backpacks with water. They carry about 5 gallons of water each one, and that comes out to about 40 pounds on top of the gear that you're wearing. So now you're wearing 40 pounds of gear, you're carrying 40 pounds of water, and we're asking firefighters to go hiking into the woods to try to extinguish a fire. And when they run out of 40 gallons of water, they got to hike back down and fill it up. That's our current brush fire capabilities. In 2024, we had to call for outside resources a number of times, and I will tell you, as surprising as this may sound, there were a couple times that we called for outside resources and we weren't provided them. And why? Well, because every town was dealing with the same thing we were dealing with. High winds, extreme heat, and we were looking at their own towns going, I can't commit the brush fire equipment from one town to North Haven. We need to be able to start to have some capability of our own. And so what we've identified here through the state bid list is this is a Polaris off-duty vehicle. It would carry 4 firefighters, and it would carry 85 gallons of water with it. And so is it going to run out after 85 gallons? Sure, but then we can drive it back down, fill it up at a hydrant, fill it up at an engine that might be nearby, and we can maybe still use these backpacks that are full of water, but now we're going to wherever this is in the woods, not having to go back down to the street where the engines are. And so it becomes much less labor intensive, much less prone for ankle sprains and injuries and so forth, and becomes a lot easier for us to be able to hydrate our firefighters, to be able to make sure that they're not getting hurt, that they're not succumbing to basically exhaustion from just carrying around water all over the time.
So Paul, to a layman like myself, 85 gallons to fight a brush fire seems like you're misting.
It does. It does. Doesn't seem like a lot, does it?
No. So if you had that piece of equipment, could you attach a trailer to it with a large water tank as well?
We could, and in some applications that might work. You know, in a grass field that might work. In the woods where we're trying, this is already pretty wide, and I do some off-roading recreationally as myself. This is pretty wide, and so I'd be worried about the trailer and making those turns, but nonetheless, is it possible?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Next item here is I am pursuing a $75,000 capital expense for an independent needs assessment of the department. I'm in my 10th year as chief. I've continued to come up to this board and ask for funding. There are times that it gets pretty contentious, and it's been a little challenging over the years, and I think it's time for us to look at an outside resource to come in and provide a needs assessment to the department. I think this should be initiated by the Board of Fire Commissioners, in that it should have significant public involvement. There's been 2 historical assessments done in the department, one in 1972 and then one in 1996. There's been nothing provided to the town since that time. What I can tell you is that after 2 line-of-duty deaths, the North Haven Professional Firefighters is pursuing their own needs assessment right now, their own staffing study through the International Association of Firefighters. We expect that to be available to us sometime this year. We have no idea of knowing what that might say. And the last thing I want to see is anybody that's in a leadership role in the town negate the findings of that study just because it's done by the union. I don't think that's appropriate. So what I think we should do is prepare our own study, have the Fire Commission, have some members of the public identify what it should contain, the objectives of the study, the scope, if you will, and develop our own so that we have 2 studies that we can look at and we can determine what the future needs of the department might be. But my thought is this could include things like apparatus, this can include things that we can do for the volunteers for recruitment and retention. It can have staffing evaluation on it, it can have some long-term planning built into it. But I don't have a quote for you. And I don't have a quote because I'm looking at other departments that have done something similar to this, and you can go on Google and you can find departments that have done studies similar to this, and you'll find that we're in the ballpark right now at $75,000. But for me to provide you a quote to correspond with this request, I'd have to identify a scope first. And I don't think it's appropriate for me to identify a scope. I think that's something the Fire Commission and the public should do.
And who would do this?
There's independent companies out there with professionals that can come in and do a needs analysis of the department.
Organizations that have backgrounds in.
Oh, yeah, they do this all over
fire
the country.
departments? That's my question.
Yep.
Could a grad student do it at UNH for less?
We've had something similar done specific to the volunteers in the past, actually, but I don't think that you're going to be able to get the magnitude that you're looking for. But it's a good question. I'm going to start to move into our incident response and what that looks like for staffing. And so pictured here, I talked before about that First Due product that documents all of our fires. This is a heat map that program is allowing us to be able to look at. So that's the incidents that occurred in just 2024. What I can tell you is that we had just under 4,800 incidents in 2024, 6,700 responses. And so what that means is that, well, one alarm may mean 2 or 3 apparatus. And so the responses are how many times each individual apparatus. The alarms are the number of total alarms. 63% were EMS, 28 fire-related, and 9% were motor vehicle accidents. We seem to be around that 200 mark on the highway for incident responses on the highway. What's worth noting here, though, is that 46% of the time we had multiple incidents that were occurring simultaneously. The other thing that I like to make sure that we bring to light is that we had 1,375 incidents in which we did not have to mobilize or dispatch any fire apparatus, and that is because of our the ability for us to be able to take back possession of that PSA we talked about a number of years ago, and to be able to subcontract out EMS responses to a private ambulance company, which continues to be Nelson, and they're doing a phenomenal job. They have metrics that they have to meet, and they are in contact with our PSAP, with our dispatch center, and because that there are certain incidents that I can send just an ambulance to and not have to send a fire resource to, and that accounts for 1,375 incidents. Some of those, most of those, we were responding to before we had the PSA, so our alarms are even higher.
So that's just Nelson?
Well, Nelson responds to a lot of the other incidents that we're going to as well, but that's Nelson taking those calls solo without any fire department response. And I'm able to do that because our medical direction, the team of physicians that oversee our response to medical incidents, have said, yeah, for these types of calls, you don't need to send a fire resource, you can send just an ambulance as long as the ambulance is in touch with our dispatch center, which they are by radio.
I want to applaud that.
Yeah, that's great. I don't think that gets acknowledged enough. I really don't. And that's not me. That's incredible.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, we're one of few towns that are able to do that.
Less times the ladder truck has to go out on a medical.
100%.
Unbelievable.
100%.
Get that sound?
Hey, Paul, just a quick sort of related question then. So if we have the 2 Nelson ambulances, which we all see parked right over here, if a call comes in from North Branford, do they dispatch one of those, or could they, or do they have another ambulance somewhere else that they dispatch?
Yeah, so and it's a good question, Tim. We're at the mercy of state statutes at that point, state regulations. So here's how it works. A town does not have to send an ambulance to another town if it's the last ambulance left in town. What that means, in other ways, is every town is allowed to hold on to one ambulance for its own citizens, right? And not have to send that one ambulance to another town for mutual aid. Where we're a little different is that, let's say we have 4 Nelson ambulances in town. Unfortunately, all 4 Nelson ambulances can be dispatched to another town. And the reason for that is because the state of Connecticut looks at our rescue being a certified ambulance.
I see.
As our one ambulance, we're holding back.
I got it.
So we do lose sometimes our Nelson ambulances entirely.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I want to get into the volunteers' strength, and this is going to begin to kind of tie into some staffing needs that we're going to have. I've got a line graph here that shows the decline in the number of volunteers since fiscal year 18-19. Now, I've shown every year at this workshop, I've shown essentially what I'm showing right now. And so I've taken that and put it onto a line graph so that we can see it. The red are the probation, the red are the volunteer firefighters. It doesn't look right on the screen, the color's a little off. The bottom are the probationary firefighters. And so the bottom line graph shows how many firefighters, volunteers we have kind of in the works that are exploring the option and are looking at, seeing if they want to become a volunteer or not. You can see that numbers continue to decline. The top line are the number of qualified, certified volunteer firefighters that we have in town. And so that number continues to decline as well. We are down to 7 qualified firefighters at West Ridge. We're down to 6 at Northeast. You can see we have 2 probationary members in the works at both of those stations. And it's important to know that Mono East was closed in 2023. There are no longer any volunteers there. So our present day, we have 17 total on the roster. This changes, right? Next week, if you ask me, there might be 19. There might be 4 more probationary. It's always kind of a moving target. But nonetheless, where we used to have 35 in each of those companies, we are now down to 6 and 7. What are we doing to try to make this better? We're doubling down on the Explorer program. We've had 1 successful individual go from being 15, 16 years old to becoming a volunteer. We have 4 more right now that look like they're going to get to that point pretty soon where they're going to be able to start to become volunteers for us. And we continue to aggressive volunteer recruitment campaigns. I don't think anybody in town knows that we don't need volunteers. It's everywhere at all times. It has been for years.
So, Paul, you've brought this to our attention numerous times. So, is this problem widespread to other departments? So, for example, how does the town of Orange get away with just an all-volunteer fire force? And they've got, some pretty good commercial there along the Post Road.
Yeah, it's a good question. So Orange relies very heavily. Let me say this. I don't want to say Orange because I don't want Orange calling me going, "What are you saying?" I'll say this about some departments. Some departments have far less call volume than what North Haven Fire responds to. I don't think that people realize the number of calls that are responding to. And I've seen some area towns post their call stats in the last couple of weeks since the close of 2024, and they're 800 calls a year. We're far above that. And so the other piece to keep in mind is some departments are very much reliant on mutual aid. And so when they have a fire, because there's kind of a pact of towns around them that are all volunteer, they call on each other.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have that ability here either.
Right.
But it's a problem everywhere. There's several towns right now that are all volunteer that are in very similar situations right now.
Yeah. Okay.
So what changed? So I was here last year giving a presentation when we talked about some operational changes that would occur if we didn't experience a staff increase and start working aggressively towards a staff increase. And so here's what's happened is every incident that we're dispatched to has a run card associated. So think of a run card, if you think back to like maybe, Squad 51 or whatever it was that was around on TV for a while, right? You'd see the piece of paper run off of a printer and you'd rip it off and that would tell you that the apparatus that were going to that call. It's the same thing, it's a run card. It's digital now, right? But it's what we use. And so every incident has a number of apparatus that are associated with it to be able to respond to. We've had to take the volunteer apparatus off of a lot of those run cards because they weren't getting out. They weren't responding. I spent years in this workshop sessions talking about the number of times that the volunteers weren't responding. I talked about standards with getting firefighters on scene. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm here to tell you what we're looking at right now. Right now, we've had to take a lot of volunteer apparatus off of the run cards because they're not there. So we've had to take a lot of the career apparatus and put them on the run cards instead. So now where I used to have to only send maybe 1 career engine and 1 volunteer engine, now I don't have that volunteer engine. So now I'm sending both career engines now because I still need 2 engines there. I can't take away from the number of people that need to be on scene. The other thing that happened is We were watching how often we would dispatch the volunteers, and they weren't getting out, they weren't responding. We fought in public hearings to get the PSA back on the ambulances because our prior ambulance company was dispatching ambulances that they knew weren't available to our medical calls and kind of serving as placeholders. We were doing the same thing with our fire apparatus. And so we met with our volunteer leadership, and they says, look, we're not available Monday through Friday, 7 to 3. Just take us offline. And I got to tell you, these volunteers, they do an incredible job. This is not any slight towards them at all. They take it personally. They get upset when they can't respond to incidents. But obviously they have jobs, they have families, they have other obligations they have to do. And so by no means is this any negative association with them at all. It's just what they're capable of doing. And I showed you the numbers, 7 and 6 volunteers. How many of them are going to be available at any given time? So we're taking the volunteer stations offline from 7 to 3 right now, consistently, every Monday through Friday. This started happening about September. And what we're also watching is they now need to make sure that they have at least 2 volunteer firefighters available in order to be in service. We have an app, right? We have something that they all have access to, that we have the ability to see, and we need to be able to see that at least 2 of them are available. And if they're not available, then the engine comes out of service. There's no point in dispatching volunteer apparatus with volunteers that just simply aren't there. And so in some cases, that out-of-service time has gone from Monday through Friday, 7 to 3, to some nights, some evenings, some weekends, sometimes it's going beyond 3 until 5, 6 at night. When this occurs, it can be up to 3 engines and a ladder truck that are out of service. There's 2 engines assigned to West Ridge. There's an engine and a truck assigned to Northeast. So every time those apparatus come out of service, those are less apparatus we can dispatch to calls. So we've taken our response capability and we've cut it in half. Now, what are the volunteers still responding to? They're responding to building fires, brush fires, car fires, and some commercial fire alarms. Some of the large target hazards, we call them, big commercial buildings in town, where we need as many people there because it's going to take us half an hour to walk through some of these buildings. But then the other thing that they're dispatched to is any time that there's not a career apparatus available, they are being dispatched. Unfortunately, when they're out of service now, that's no longer happening. They're not responding. And so here's what it looks like. This is showing you the serviceable area of each of the 4 stations, fire stations in town. On the left is what it was like up until mid-2024. The yellow apparatus are your volunteer apparatus. The white are career. The one green one there is the volunteer unit that was taken out of service in 2023. And so that is up until 2024, and in years prior, this is what you had, 4 stations and all those apparatus available to respond. Now, since about the fall of 2024, 2 stations come offline, and you're left with the 4 apparatus that you see there. Just to kind of put this a little bit differently, and I used this slide last year, so it might look familiar to you. From 1974 until about 2006, when we started to kind of see in the industry the volunteer firefighters on the decline, we had, again, 2 engines. You can see West Ridge, Mono East, Northeast, 2 engines in each of those stations. Each engine sat 6 firefighters, so we could expect to have 12 firefighters in total responding from that station. So what did that mean? Well, that meant in 10 minutes, we could get 43 firefighters on scene in town of North Haven without any mutual aid, without any outside resources at all. And I'm going to tell you that even outside of those 12 firefighters, there were 35 assigned to that station. Chances are another 10 might have been available. They would get in their cars and they would drive to the scene. And so we would have 60, 70 firefighters on scene from North Haven alone. We didn't have to call mutual aid. We didn't have to rely on outside resources. Today, we're looking at 10 firefighters on scene in 10 minutes. Your 10 career firefighters, assuming that they're all available, is what's available to respond. Our minimum staffing continues to be 10 firefighters. You can see there on the left how it's changed over the years. The only thing to know is that's assuming that all of the career staff are available. So when we talk about overlapping calls, that is a number of incidents that are occurring simultaneously. The issue is that we have too much reliance right now on volunteer firefighter response. Again, 3 engines in a truck are coming out of service every time those stations come offline. It accounts for about 24 to 30% of the overall week. One thing to know is that we require the volunteer firefighters, we require at least 2 of them to be available per station, and they can respond within 15 minutes. So you're still looking at 15 minutes that we allow, and we have to, right? But 15 minutes for them to get to wherever they are, to the station, be able to pick up the engine, whatever was dispatched, and respond to the scene. So your on-scene times in some cases are still 20, 25 minutes. Overlapping incidents, let's talk about that for a moment. And so I want to talk to you about how that occurs. 46% of our total incidents are occurring simultaneously. The chart on the right is a 2024 overlapping incidents. You can see a number of times that there were at least 2 calls occurring, 739 times. Counts for 1,478 incidents. Okay, number of times that there were 3, 4. There is a time where we had 11 calls occurring at the same time. So overlapping incidents, this is how it's happening, is you have one scene taking place, and that apparatus has not cleared that scene yet, and there's another incident coming in. So how does that occur? Well, let's take the highway, Route 15. Right now I'm sending the rescue and 2 engines. Again, I didn't have to, right? At one time I could send the rescue, an engine, and a volunteer engine. I can't do that anymore. I still need to make sure I maintain the safety in that highway scene, so I'm sending both career engines now, so that one's serving as a blocking unit. And so all 3 of those apparatus are tied up, and that's happening about 16 times a month. We're on the highway usually for about 30 minutes at a time, sometimes longer, depending on what's going on up there. So out of the 4 career apparatus you have in service, that's 3 of them right there being tied up on the highway for a considerable amount of time. One more incident might come in, and that might be a cardiac arrest, and we're going to send the ladder truck to that call, and then unfortunately there's nobody else available to send with it. And that's not necessarily ideal, because you want to send at least 2 apparatus to a cardiac arrest incident. And why? Well, because people get tired doing CPR, right? The scene's chaotic. You've got to deal with family. Maybe you have to bring the person down. I hate to say it, but unfortunately, when you have a cardiac arrest, you're very seldom right inside the front door. You're usually somewhere up on a 3rd floor or in the basement. And so it's labor intensive to get people out and have enough help to get it off into an ambulance. And so what we have happened there, and what I want to draw your attention to is, in that case, it would be a medical echo. It's the highest severity of medical incident that we can call it, right? It's nationally recognized what a medical echo is. We should be dispatching 2 apparatus. So it should be the tower that would be left at that point, however it's going solo. And then what the CAD's doing is the CAD's associating what we call an NFU, no fire unit available. So I have programmed into the CAD every time that a fire apparatus is supposed to be dispatched and there's not one available, it's associating an NFU to it, so we can track it, right, for data purposes. The next incident that occurs, there's no fire response occurring. So in the case here, we have 3 incidents occurring at 149 times in 2024. If this happened to be the 3rd incident coming in, I would have no fire resource to send.
And in those cases, Chief, where you have overlapping calls and say they exceed 3, how many of them are medical in nature, and you can call Nelson?
So we go back to the fact that about 55% of our calls are medical, so you're going back to that.
Right. So you could call Nelson
for medicals
to be dealing
Yep,
with at least the medical.
Nelson's going to respond, or an ambulance is going to respond if it's a medical incident, yeah.
Right.
Still, that leaves roughly 100 calls where they were fire related, based on the chart you got there. So is that a mutual aid?
No, this chart is not just medicals at all.
I know, but I'm saying you got 200 calls, just looking at the numbers there, right? 55% of them are saying are roughly 200 calls is the 3 and 4 concurrent calls, right? So you got about 200 there, right? And a couple others higher. So you got about 200 calls where there was more than 3 concurrent situations, right? Mm-hmm. So about half of those we're saying are medical, right? So the other half, is it mutual aid? How are we handling those?
So we're going to cover that in a minute, but I'm not going to assume that they're medicals. They could be anything.
Right.
They could be fires, it could be medicals, it could be anything.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying rounding, if 55% of your calls are medical, right? And you got 200 calls that are 3 or more incidents, and roughly half had to be fires, give or take a few numbers, right?
I'll go with that, sure.
Yeah, that's all. Okay.
Yep. So what about mutual aid? I think there's a big misnomer out there for how mutual aid is used. Mutual aid is not intended to cover our routine call volume. When I'm showing you stats that are showing overlapping concurrent calls that are taking place, that's routine call volume. Mutual aid is not intended to do that. We don't go to any of our surrounding towns because they can't go to a medical call, or because they can't go to a car fire, or because they can't go to a brush fire. We don't go to any towns around us for that purpose. So we're not calling in other towns for that purpose. We're calling in mutual aid when we have a large incident that we need assistance with. That's exactly what we're providing mutual aid to our surrounding towns for. If we have a large incident that we need a lot of personnel and apparatus for, there are times that we will put on our town on station standby. So we will have another town come in, fill one of our stations, and be there in case something else occurs fire-related in our town. We typically put the medicals at that point solely on Nelson Ambulance. I think the big misconception is that we are not going, so let's go back to that incident, right, where you have multiple calls occurring. If a fire incident is occurring, we're not calling mutual aid with the exception of a very few things. So let's go back to that scenario, okay? Let's go back to this here, this scenario. The accident on the highway, a cardiac arrest coming in that third incident. We're gonna call mutual aid for that third incident, if it's a fire incident, if it's a building fire, or if life is imminently in danger. That's what we're going to call mutual aid for. If it's a car fire, if it's a brush fire, if it's an auto accident, if it's a medical, if it's a fire alarm at a school, we're not calling mutual aid. There's going to be nobody going from the fire department until we have something available. That's the framework. That's what we have set up in this town. We cannot begin to call mutual aid to cover our routine incidents. What's going to happen is that dispatch is going to try to reach the on-duty fire shift commander. Unfortunately, that on-duty fire shift commander is tied to Engine 1. That is where that individual is assigned to. And so the dispatcher will be trying to call that shift commander to say, hey, I have this, what do you want me to do? And it needs to be that way because our dispatchers, they do a great job. But the fire department needs to take responsibility for calling in mutual aid from other towns because those towns are incurring an expense of about $1,600 sometimes in order, no different than us. So the fire department shift commander, we're gonna hope that he is available to be able to answer the radio and be able to call an audible on what to do next. But there's times that he's not. If he's packed up, wearing a mask, working on a car fire, if he's doing compressions on somebody's chest, he may not have his ear to the radio to be able to make that call. We need to look eventually, and we've asked for this before, of getting that shift commander off of the engine and assigned to a vehicle where just that shift commander can go to calls and can take care of the entire town. And that is what every single town around us has. They have a shift commander assigned to a vehicle. You see it when you're driving around our towns, right? You see it all marked up. And that's what we should really be focused on moving forward with, so that individual can call those audibles and can go to the scenes where he or she needs to be able to go to.
So an individual person would be able to respond to a call as opposed to...
In some cases, yeah.
So you just got through making the argument that a medical call requires sometimes 2 or more people.
I'm not talking about medical, I'm talking about fire calls right now.
So
a fire call, so that third call coming in, let's say, is let's say it's reported as a car fire next to a building, right? Mm-hmm. That shift commander can start perhaps mutual aid, start that direction, get on scene and say, hey, you know what? It's not as bad as it was reported because we can't put all the reliance on these 911 calls. People are calling in their worst moments sometimes and they're making it sound sometimes a lot worse than it is. And so we're throwing a lot of resources at incidents sometimes. That shift commander can arrive on scene and say, no, it's not that bad, I only need this.
Okay, and if that shift commander is in, say, an SUV, what is he or she going to do?
Be able to temper that response down appropriately so that now, instead of necessarily sending 3-4 apparatus for what it's reported to be, that shift commander arrived on scene, sees what it is, and can scale that response down.
I see. Okay. And in the last year, how many times have we been in the situation where you have no one to send?
Well, we just saw the numbers.
Right.
Yeah, we're just on the board.
Now, I'm not going to cover that in a moment.
Okay.
So what we have right now is an inconsistent level of service. It's becoming almost a first come, first serve fire department based on which call order you're calling in 911. And so 64 times in 2024, the CAD, okay, that going back to the dispatch system, populated an NFU because there were not enough apparatus responding. And so 64 times an NFU was populated because either there wasn't enough apparatus responding or there was nobody available. In some cases, it might have populated an NFU, and maybe we cleared a couple minutes later, and we were delayed in responding, but nonetheless, that NFU was populated because there was no fire apparatus available. What is that doing? It's increasing the chance for firefighter injuries, causing residents to have to wait several minutes for the fire department, and it's causing an inadequate number of fire apparatus for response at times. We can see that you've seen this before, how fast fire spreads is on the bottom, and how you have precious minutes to be able to get into an incident before the scene doubles in size. And then you can see here the amount of time that we have to be able to provide defibrillation and the chances of cardiac arrest survival.
And have you seen this trend has translated into a larger number of minutes to average response time?
Yeah, so that's hard to do, because what's happening is and you asked for this before too, you've asked for the response times, right? Well, what good does that do if 64 times maybe we weren't able to respond at all? Those times aren't going to be accurate. It's a inaccurate depiction of the response of the department if there's scenes that we can't go to at all. All you're looking at then is the scenes we can go to. Mm-hmm. So, to me, this isn't something that I think we should continue with. This is really getting worse and worse as we rely less and less on the volunteers.
So the NFU is just kind of it is what it is, and it's never going to change, or at some point something gets freed up, and in which case then the response time would be longer, but then
depends.
the status would change.
It depends. The NFU is assigned the second that the run card is looking for an apparatus that's not there. And again, sometimes we're able to respond and we'll be delayed. Sometimes we never assemble a response at all.
Got it. Okay.
Only a couple slides less. And so what I'm looking for here is 4 firefighters in this next budget year. And it would be at an expense of $506,000. We need to start looking at increasing the number of firefighters per shift. We're looking at incrementally over the next several years, increasing it to 14 to 17. That'll allow us to be able to put an additional engine in service. That'll allow us to be able to do things like cut back on the number of overtime firefighters. That'll allow us to put an officer in a car to be able to respond to incidents and figure out how much of a response is necessarily needed. How do I see the future? I think that this is going to continue to get worse in terms of the volunteers. I don't see it getting better anytime soon. This is a trend that we're seeing throughout the nation and throughout Connecticut. We need to temper economic growth right now until we know what the capabilities of the fire service is. We got to make sure the community is aware of this. I don't think the community necessarily knows that you may not get a fire department response if you call 911. But we may have, let's say, an alarm going on at the elementary school and no firefighters going. I don't think that the people necessarily realize that. But I do anticipate the volunteer firefighter status to at least remain the same. They are a mighty few right now that are doubling down and trying to provide the best service that they can, and we have some really dedicated volunteers. But we have an aging volunteer service as well that we see is going to continue to happen. But we've got to continue to monitor the number of firefighter paramedics within the career side. I'm happy to report that as of yesterday, the 2 vacancies that we have in the department, I'm going to be able to replace with 2 paramedics. And so that's great news. It also helps this board in being able to know kind of where we are with next year's budget. They will start the academy on February 14th or so, and they'll finish sometime in June. This is the 5-year capital plan that's in your worksheets. And that is all that I have. And to go back and answer your question, Nancy, on the overtime, so where we're looking at is as you start looking at the inability of the volunteers to be able to respond. So they're out of service, let's say, Monday through Friday, 7 to 3. Anytime that I send a apparatus to another town for fire coverage, I need to call back overtime, because those firefighters are going to a fire in another town, another municipality, and I need to be able to fill those firefighters back. I never had to do that before, because I would put the volunteers on standby, and now the volunteers in each of their stations able to, fill in that void. That's not the case anymore. And so we're also looking at things like the volunteers have said, hey, look, we don't have enough volunteers to be on standby. If we had a nasty winter storm going on right now, for all of those years, I would put the volunteers on standby. We would have volunteers kind of hanging out in the station, able to respond to incidents. They don't want to do that anymore. And so when that happens, I need to be able to activate additional career staff, which is why I anticipate those activations going up.
Even with the renovations to Northeast, they wouldn't want to hang out in the nice new facility?
We'll see, but they haven't had it in 12 years.
Okay, we'll find out. Okay. And you mentioned that you're asking for 4 new firefighters. That's just, 1 year. What is your bigger vision?
We need to get to 14 to 17 firefighters per shift.
Okay. And the reason being that
So like I said, we need to put an additional apparatus on. We've got to put an officer in the car, and we've got to be able to build some depth so that we can run down, similar to what we're doing now with the 11 to 10, we can necessarily maybe run down 17 to 14 and lessen that impact on the contractual replacement staffing line.
Right. But each one of those people then comes with their own set of holidays and vacation days that have to be replaced,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah,
and where would you put all these people?
So Northeast is being remodeled to accommodate career staff, right? And so if you think about how do we get to that number?
Hold on. I think that the $300,000 was to renovate Northeast as a volunteer firehouse. I don't believe the decision has been made to make Northeast.
Well, I can tell you that the remodeling that's taking place there is to accommodate career firefighters.
It could accommodate
So,
anyone
right,
that needs to
so
sleep.
then there it is.
Right. So I'm, again, if I look at your current fiscal year budget and looking at, 23, 24 versus actual, those line items that are most in excess of the budgeted amount happen to be the costs associated with running a building, heating, electricity, gas and oil and so forth. So you're talking about opening up a third building 24/7, right, to make it a career firehouse, when in fact this happens to be the biggest variable that you really can't control and could potentially, be a very significant increase in your total budget. Have you considered just simply utilizing that second bay at Monowese and, perhaps putting an ambulance there, and then you're just really running 2 firehouses?
Yeah, so this doesn't surprise me that you're asking for this, because you've argued against putting firefighters in Monowese as well, because you never seem to understand the time, distance, travel aspect of firefighting, right? So again, going back to the fact that fires are doubling, tripling in size, and going back to the fact that we need to have CPR taking place on somebody within minutes, the reason that these fire stations are placed where they are in town is so that we can get to different parts of town as fast as possible. So I think that the cost associated with staffing or with maintaining a station and the increase in maybe utilities is minimal compared to the impact it's going to have on the community that live in that Northeast area. I can tell you that if you go back to the Monowese neighbors, they love the fact that there's a station responding from Monowese to their neighborhood. And so I would challenge you to go back and ask the people at Northeast if they really felt that was in their best interest or not to put a second, you said ambulance, down at Monowese. I don't think that's appropriate. And we had this argument back when we opened Monowese as well. There was this concern that all the utilities were going to go up so much. It didn't. It didn't. The station right now is set at 68 degrees. The lights are on motion detectors. What's going to go up? The gas, because they're going to be cooking in the kitchen? There's no increased cost with opening a station.
And then it would have to be further investment to convert it from what it is, even with these $300,000 worth of improvements, into a functioning full-time career firehouse.
I'm pretty confident.
What would you estimate that cost would be?
With the $300,000 is going to get us pretty close to being finalized. The $300,000 donation from Quinnipiac will get us pretty close to there.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, I've noticed that I get the DOT when there's accidents, and I'm always like, oh, North Haven.
Yep.
And you guys have had, there's been some horrific ones that you've had to respond to, which means if you're, and I've seen them too, where there's been a truck trying to block, and that also I see that's something that's happening more and more. There seems to be a lot more distracted driving or people not paying attention, and every time I see 91 North Haven, I'm like, okay, the fire department, or I see you guys, and I think that's something that's getting worse now. So that's something else that you guys have to deal with. And if you're on the highway and you've got 2 engines on there, I mean, there's an example of what you're doing. And then back to the comment that Nancy was talking about. I live on the Monterey section of town, and over the years, Mr. Frieda has developed that whole area with Universal Drive, and now we're seeing things on Northeast. That's being developed too. So it makes sense with what the growth of this town is and what the resources are, and there's a lot of issues going on. And like I said, that every time I see the I-95 North Haven, I'm like, okay, that's a lot. That's something that is playing in now. It wasn't as bad, but it's a constant thing with distracted drivers.
And it's not just 91. 'cause
No,
we also
you have to do the merit. Which
And I
that's-
will say I am on the northeast side of town, and there are big apartment buildings that have been going up. There is Amazon. It is a very congested area, and there's a lot of residents now.
Yeah, try to take a left
Yeah.
on anywhere if you're on the right side. Sometimes I just get on the highway at 13. It's not worth it, but it's growth.
Yep.
Like Monterey's, that area was growing, this area is growing, so I understand what you're saying, it makes sense.
Yeah, and listen, I've my 10th year doing this. I'm anticipating these arguments. So you know something? Hire the independent needs analysis. Let them come in and tell you.
You know, I'm certainly appreciative that Quinnipiac University donated allocated donated the $300,000, and our first selectman dedicated those monies to Northeast with the thought, and he did make a commitment to make Northeast a full-time fire station. He publicly announced that. I know that's not official, but he certainly announced that that was our intent. And our fire commission is absolutely in support of that. And I think, as Jen just indicated, with the growth that has taken place in that geographical area, including Quinnipiac University, with all of the students that are there on their campus and the frequency that we respond to their campus and the surrounding area, it makes a world of sense to make Northeast a full-time station. And the renovations that are taking place, as the chief indicated, will accommodate a full-time station to be operational as soon as we have the personnel that's able to man that station. So we're hopeful that that happens sooner rather than later, and I think it'll be a benefit to the residents of this town.
I think we all can agree that there's 2 growth areas in town, the north side of town and the southern side of town. That's where the growth's been going on, the apartment buildings. That's the available spaces. There's growth on the southern side of town. I mean, they've been building those homes on Warner, the old on the farm there for a while. Mike talked at this board about the huge expansion that is going to go on down at Covidian, and while I would say the population of town has probably been stagnant, my guess is over the last 10 years. I mean, the town still is growing in a lot of ways, and Paul, you've made compelling arguments for many years in front of the board here on this same Saturday, for the number of calls and the reduction in the volunteers that you just mentioned again today. And Nancy's right. I mean, there are some other costs that would be involved if we added 4 people, and we'd have to take those into account. They're going to occur, but the choice for this board is what it's always been, which is that we've got to balance the dire need to have additional staff with obviously the cost to the taxpayers. There's always been someone who's come up and who's had but had an experience with the fire department. They've had a friend, a relative, a loved one who's had maybe a heart attack or something, and I've always gotten a great response from the town. And look, some of the numbers you put up on the board, including the ones with multiple incidents, are pretty surprising to me anyways, because I'm just not that close to the data. But I mean, that's a lot of times when we've had even 2 calls. To me is a lot, so I appreciate the information.
Yeah, I think having data is always a very welcome thing, especially for this board, and certainly our community safety is our paramount concern, absolutely. And I think you always have to weigh the pros and cons and the benefits and the potential drawbacks of any significant change. And based on our experience with Monowese, in addition to the costs of then renovating a third career firehouse, you would also, I assume, you would want another tier of officers that would be separate from both Monowese and headquarters.
He's got a lieutenant here and three firefighters, right?
So that would be another expense, and again, that's just one shift, right? So there are obviously multiple shifts. And again, I've been kind of tracking some of this data, and again, it's good to get into the weeds because this doesn't tell the whole story, but from fiscal year 22 to 23, it sounds like the total number of alarms, based upon your previous presentations, actually went down by 6%, and then based upon your numbers today, it went down another about 1.5%, whereas the responses from Nelson Ambulance from 22 to 23 went up 13%, and then again from 23 to 24 another almost 11%. So it seems as though that should actually work in our town's favor. Of course, you have to look into the details of what that actually means, but in theory, that should be a net benefit in terms of the actual demands on the fire department. So I appreciate
get it, Nancy, but those kind of numbers to me aren't linear. I mean, there's just, I'm sure there's a certain range you can put in, or that Paul could do for us on the number of calls you get, on average in a 10-year period, but I mean, they could get really spiky, my guess is, right? I mean, you could have a 10% increase in calls next year for
Just a winter storm.
Yeah.
I mean, a winter storm, we can get a tornado, we can get 200 incidents from. I mean, so
Right.
I guess the question I have is, what's it going to take? Like, so, I mean, right now we're talking about missing the third call, right? It could be a car fire in Home Depot Plaza. It could be a brush fire, I mean, is this board prepared to take those phone calls from the residents and say, hey, the fire department told you that we weren't going to be able to do this. I'm watching this happen right now in California. Watch it happen in Maui. Watch it happen everywhere else. The fire chief's coming under fire, and the fire chief's coming back and saying, I asked. And so my question is, how many incidents does it need to take? I mean, if I'm showing you 60-something times that it happened, right? How many times is it going to have to take before we say, okay, that's enough? Like, where's the threshold? And I guess just let me know where that threshold is, and I'll stop asking for staff until I know we've met that threshold.
I think your job is to ask, Paul, and I have to say, I've been on this board a long time, as has Mike. The board and the town, more importantly, has given the fire department increasing resources for years and years. At one time, when Ed was here, we actually used to have a sheet that tallied, the various growth items that we've given the fire department. So my opinion is, I think what we've done over the years is we've supported the board and the fire department incrementally over the years by adding staff, by adding vehicles, and look, you're right. I mean, if there's an incident like going on in LA right now, we're probably going to get criticized because we didn't add, more firefighters than we had last year.
Happen here, but you know what I'm saying.
Right, sure. I know. I mean, so look, I think we all understand, the request. We all understand the need. It's a question, like it always has been, of balancing the need for this. I mean, there's the police chief's going to be here. I looked at his budget. He's got he's budgeting 2 more officers, right? So that's a decision we're going to have to make, obviously, in conjunction with the first selectman. And again, I understand the need, and I understand that long term, this is where we're going to end up anyways. It's just a question of how we get there and when we get there.
Fair enough.
I think the one thing about, saying that we've supported the fire department and adding staff over time is you're adding career staff to make up for the fact that there's been a steady decline in the volunteers. So it's not, you can't make it as a one-to-one comparison with the police department, right? Because the police department has never relied on volunteers to do their work.
This is the Board of Finance, Jenny. It's, in that respect, it's the dollars, right? I mean, it's not really true, but the volunteers are free, so to speak, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, we've.
I'm just saying, as you're weighing what the cost benefit is, you can't, you're replacing a career firefighter, you're right, costs money, but it is replacing a significant decline in volunteers.
Sure it is.
So it's not really the same one-to-one comparison that you can put on other departments, because other departments have not essentially relied on the volunteers.
Right.
to prevent the board from having to put that expense forward. So I just,
Right.
that is just something to remember as you're saying, okay, we've done this in the past.
Right.
And I guess, the question is, when does the critical need get to the point where, the board decides this is a priority?
In my mind, I think it's up to the residents will come to
Right.
that conclusion, when they look at the budget. And and it's a daunting task. I say this every year. The job that this board has is daunting. But ultimately, the residents make the determination whether they pass the budget or they don't pass the budget. Generally, there's never the opportunity to say why they didn't pass the budget, or here's an opportunity where I would like to increase public safety or public works or whatever it might be during that referendum. But I think the public needs to articulate their wishes once this board comes to a conclusion. And I absolutely agree with you, Tim. It's the dollars and cents. Folks, they want their leaves picked up. They want the bulk trash picked up. But in the meantime, we're talking about life-saving services here. And our chief makes a plea every single year, and it's important for him to lay that out. And it's important for each one of you to determine how the monies and the dollars are spent. We understand that. But again, if our board, our decision-making and our understanding of all of the details, we plead to this board to deliver the services or the monies that we need to deliver the services to the residents for. So it's a difficult situation, there's no question about it. And we're hopeful that as economic development continues to grow and develop into our town, they take into consideration how much pressure is put on the fire department. It's a huge responsibility to provide the quality customer service to the business owners that are looking to come into this town or grow in town, as well as the persons who are moving into town. So we're hopeful that we are going to be allowed to perform the services that we're committed to perform.
Thank you, Pat. And I guess I would add for myself personally, and I'm guessing the rest of the board would agree, is that I'm personally mindful of the fact that, the town's had 2 meaningful increases in the mill rate 2 years in a row now. The first one occurred after we hadn't really had much of an increase for a long time, and now we've had 2 in a row. So, that's obviously another balancing factor, and reval has a potential impact as well. So, other members, do we have questions for?
I just have one question about the employment table, and again, this could just be that it needs some tweaking from the finance office. But Paul, if you wouldn't mind, from the current fiscal year to the proposed year, it looks like the secretary position is being eliminated. Program administrator is going up by 38%. And the senior clerk that didn't exist this year, it looks like, is being created for the next year. So is that just kind of swapping out? Because the total dollar amount isn't much, but in terms of a difference from year to year, I'm just wondering in terms of the personnel.
Yeah, just give Rich Monaco a moment to just look at what you're looking at. He
Sure.
prepares those sheets, just give him a minute, please.
Sure.
Well, one of the changes was, and I don't have, I'm missing, you're looking at last year's report. This was not showing it, but you did have some positions.
You have to combine the 2 reports.
Yeah, you did have some positions that changed. Yvonne had moved from a
5 to a 6, roughly.
Yeah, she actually stepped up one in the group. And there may have been an extension in someone's hours, and I think that was it. I don't think there was anything else.
And I don't have that, but did we add the probationary firefighter with no dollar?
Those, yeah, I put 2 in.
Is that what that is, Rich? I was wondering what that
Yeah, I
was.
put 2 recruit
Replacement.
replacement. We weren't sure if Paul was having people that were going to leave.
I didn't know what that meant.
So we put the position in there with $0. Obviously, Paul's aware of the fact that if he does utilize it and adds 2 people because he knows he has someone retiring, he has to make sure he doesn't exceed his
Full-time.
dollars because he can't
Let me give you an
There's no
example.
additional appropriation.
Yeah, so here's a good example. The Fire Academy only starts in January and September. And that's it, those two periods of time. If I'm anticipating a vacancy, because I know, obviously I talk to the membership, I know who's gonna retire, I kinda know who's not. If I know there's gonna be a retirement coming, in this last case, I wasn't notified till January 1st, right, officially. Well, I can't hire until that person retires. Whereas this is allowing me to say, okay, I've got a retirement coming, I know what's gonna happen, I can start to make a move on a list and on a candidate and be able to take out that overtime. If I wasn't able to just hire these last two people that just passed their final pre-employment test outside of North Haven yesterday, we were going to incur overtime for the next year. Because I'm not able to anticipate that they're going to be able to go anywhere and be able to take them on as an employee because this line doesn't exist. So this line is gonna allow me to kind of do a little bit of a juggling match to know that I've got a retirement coming, I've got somebody who I know is gonna be able to go, and I can start to be able to pre-employ them and get them into the academy.
And how long is the academy, Paul?
It's about 4 months, 16 weeks. It's a residential academy. You stay there Sunday through Friday.
So I guess in theory, if you had a firefighter that's retiring, you'd hire someone, they'd go to the academy for 4 months, and then come back here, work full-time when the person retires.
Yeah, and to take that back a step, it'd probably be even a little bit different, but very similar. If I knew someone's gonna retire, I can start hiring them in November.
Yeah.
I don't have to wait for them to retire officially
Right.
on January 1st. I can start hiring them in November, know that there's gonna be a vacancy, start getting through all the pre-employment process, which takes about 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And anticipate them to be able to join the academy in February.
Yeah.
Right now, I can't do that.
Okay.
But you will have a vacancy while they're in the academy.
I'll have a vacancy on the ship, but not a vacancy in the table of employment, and that's the issue. The table of employment keeps me from being able to pre-employ, if you will,
Yeah.
anybody.
Right.
Even though we had those two positions already budgeted.
But they're still occupied.
Yeah,
until
there's still,
January
so,
1st.
I see.
yeah.
So you're double counting for some short period of time.
Very short period of time.
In
Got it.
theory, he would have a short-term add to staff by having someone in the academy while someone is still employed and has yet to retire, right? And that's sort of what we're saying, right?
In essence, to be able to save on that overtime, because the next
Yeah.
academy is 6 months away.
Right. And there's nothing in the CBA that says that you need to have a certain amount of time for retirements, announcements, I should say.
Thank you, Rich.
Any other questions from the members? No. Michael?
A quick one here. I pretty much ask the same question every year, so I don't know why I don't just submit it in advance. But it just comes down to the availability of federal and state grants. You have almost $1 million in capital here. I don't know what we're eligible for. Are we, whether it be the hydrant work or the brush truck or the fencing, or I don't know, what programs exist and what we might be eligible for. And by the way, and the second question being, if it's in our budget, are we not eligible to apply for something that the state or federal people think that we can afford on our own?
So it's a fair question. So some grants require that the item be identified in our 5-year capital plan, which is why some of these appear in your 5-year plan, and they kind of stay 2-3 years out just to be able to satisfy that purpose. But the needs for this coming year, there are no grants available for hydrants. That is water company, regional specific. There's nothing available to us for brush fire equipment. Obviously, training center, fencing and so forth. No, there's nothing there that we can work with. No, nothing. Unfortunately, every time the Assistance of Firefighters grant, you can go online and look at it. So if you look up the FEMA AFG, it's called NOFO, Notice of Fire Offering or something to that effect. You'll see in there what they prioritize as the key items that are going to be awarded that year. If you're not proposing something that's at a high priority, you're not getting it. And none of these items would be high priority for us on a national level.
Yeah, I know you have standard grant programs, but I wasn't sure outside of that if there's, if Mr. Iacarino or someone could advocate for any of these items.
Yeah, to my knowledge, and Mr. Fried and I have talked about it a few times, there's some discretionary congressional spending that we can potentially pursue through our representatives in Washington, but he and I have not had a conversation about anything specific to these, no.
Okay. So always looking for outside dollars.
Sure.
My other comment is that your presentation today was very comprehensive and detailed, and I really appreciate the time and effort you put in to make this very understandable. Thank you.
All right, doesn't look like we have any other questions. Thanks so much to the chief and members of the board for their presentation this morning.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.